Chapter 1323. He died just like that? Queen Sylvanas' face was still frozen in disbelief. Did we win? Duque smiled as he walked over and hooked Queen Sylvanas' little nose. In order to fight against my elemental advantage, Vec Lore almost changed the attributes of his entire body to shadow. He was gambling on the fact that there was no strong direct sunlight in this dark underground palace. Obviously, he bet on the wrong bet. Queen Sylvanas was stunned for a moment before a bright smile blossomed on her face. You master tacticians are all despicable. Duque was speechless. In history, Queen Sylvanas was a ruthless person who had no choice but to max out her talent in scheming. It was fine to be mocked by anyone but Queen Sylvanas. Duque was a little displeased. Wasn't this the same as a certain master tactician mocking others? You guys are all dirty. I'm not going to take the blame for this. Alright. I'm just a little regretful. My great hero, you can't be so petty. As she spoke, two fair arms had already wrapped around him. On her perfect smiling face, her long and curly eyelashes had already drooped. With such benefits, all of Duque's complaints disappeared. He decisively went up to taste Queen Sylvanas' little tongue. After an unknown period of time, the two of them were awakened by the sound of footsteps from afar. Humph. You guys are having fun. There were still beads of sweat on Aurelia's temples as she rushed over. Evidently, she had rushed over after fighting the family of three. Of course, as the eldest sister of the Fengxing family, she would only pretend to be angry when she saw this scene. Behind Aurelia were the other members of the hero team. No one would blame Duque for not coming over to help after the fight. Duque had already fought the strongest enemy. If they couldn't even deal with an ordinary leader, they wouldn't be qualified to stay in the hero team. The battle on William's side was the last to end, and it was rather pathetic. Many of them had sustained injuries that were neither light nor heavy. What made him feel even worse was that Onyxia had actually run over to ask if he needed help after getting rid of Princess Huhuran. On the surface, she seemed to be well-intentioned, but from the tone of the Princess of the Black Dragon's teasing tone, it was clear that she would help as long as William asked. However, it was unknown if she would say something behind his back. William didn't reply immediately. Instead, he asked about everyone's situation. When he found out that his group was the last to fight, he made an interesting choice. He wanted Onyxia to hold the line, but he wanted the members in the cave to rely on their own strength to finish off the tenacious Fancaris. Looking at the battered William and the rest walking towards him, Duque nodded slightly. William took the initiative and said, "I'm sorry, it seems like I made the wrong choice. Because of my decision, the Alliance's hero team was nearly wiped out." Duque shook his head. No, there is no right choice in this world. The so-called correctness was just a theory of results. In that chaotic situation, since Magni wasn't around, and you took over the command and made the choice, you are a qualified leader. Actually, I'm quite curious. Why didn't you accept Onyxia's help just now? This. William had a strange expression on his face. If the situation was dire, I would, even if she was said to be a sinister black dragon who would betray us at any time. TSK. Onyxia snorted coldly behind Duque. If it was her master or someone else, I wouldn't be at ease with her. Since it was Uncle Duque, the savior of Stormwind, I definitely approve of your decision. Moreover, the situation was already stable at that time, so I would rather let everyone have a better experience. A wise choice, Duque praised sincerely. You're starting to become an outstanding leader. William nodded humbly. Thank you, Uncle Duque. Actually, I would like to consult you, who is known as the greatest strategist in the history of the Alliance. What's a better way to break the other party's conspiracy? As an elder, Duque explained to William in detail, when the other party has obviously set up a trap, as a leader, the first thing to do is to make a decisive decision. Being overcautious and not doing anything is the worst. As long as you make a decision, even if it's a wrong decision, it's better than doing nothing and letting the team follow the other party's ideas and let the situation develop. Duque continued, be it strategy or tactics, they are all psychological games. There was no such thing as an absolute mental model. If you have a deeper understanding of the enemy, but the enemy doesn't know anything about you, then you've already won half of the battle. Then, Uncle Duque, why are you always able to use all kinds of exaggerated methods to deal with the enemy? That's because I'm a transmigrator. Cough cough. Duke lectured with a straight face, I have always used strange ideas to defeat my enemies, because I have jumped out of the enemy's way of thinking. At the same time, I have a broader vision than the enemy. That's why I can always win. I've never been the most outstanding one. I'm only a little better than the enemy. I also know that what I lack the most is experience, but since my subjects have high expectations of me, I want to avoid detours as much as possible. Do you have any good ideas or good guidelines? You don't say, there really is. I found this rather interesting book on the art of war in Mediva's library. I'll give it to you today. I hope you can read it and read it thoroughly. With that, the sage-like Dumuk solemnly took out an ancient book that had been specially dyed yellow with soy sauce, washed, and dried. What book is this? William's eyes widened. Under the watchful eyes of Valilla and Brawl, he caressed the cover and slowly opened the first page. He looked at the strange square words and was extremely confused. Oh, I forgot that you don't know any languages other than the common language and Darnassus. For this day, I've prepared my translation for you. Duque took out a newly written translation in the common language. Sun Tzu's Art of War, How to Get More Grandchildren. First, you have to find 100 beauties who are willing to have children with you. Give birth to 1,000 children, and then. Before William could finish reading, Duque snatched the book back at lightning speed. You're mistaken, this is the book. Duque took out another translation of Sun Tzu's Art of War. He could clearly feel more than 10 shy and angry gazes from all around him. War is a matter of great importance to a country. It's the land of life and death, the path of survival. It must be examined. Although it was a little hard to understand after William read it out, it was more than 100 times more pretentious in an instant. Chapter 1324. Sun Tzu's Art of War was a top-notch work that revealed the laws of competition. It displayed novel concepts that had never been seen in the world of Azeroth. When a series of profound strategic concepts such as using intelligence to conquer strength, using softness to conquer strength, and winning without fighting were displayed, William was quickly engrossed in it. At the same time, the profound philosophical concepts of using virtue to subdue people and the unity of man and nature made William even more mesmerized. Before Duque traveled to this world, the influence of this masterpiece had far exceeded the borders of the country. Many famous foreign strategists were intoxicated by the broad and profound traditional strategic culture of China. Not only did this masterpiece transcend national boundaries, but it also transcended time and space. As British Air Marshal John Slessor said in China's Military Maxim, what's fascinating about Sun Tzu is how amazingly up-to-date his ideas are. By changing some of the words slightly, his maxim seems to have been written yesterday. This masterpiece was no longer simply a work of war. It had become a must-read for leaders in the fields of politics, economics, and diplomacy. Sun Tzu's ideas were not only widely used in the modern military field, but also in politics, economics, diplomacy, and sports. For such a godly book, which had been explained in detail by Duque in the common language, William was almost instantly sure that this was the legendary Holy Bible. Looking at this Holy Bible, William's slight disappointment from making the wrong choice was immediately swept away. His eyes contained a brighter light than before, as if there was a raging flame burning in them. Unknowingly, Magni had also come over, and even the other kings had come over to watch. It was only when Duque slapped William and Magni's shoulders that they snapped out of it. All right. Thun is not dead yet. Let's retreat first. If it was in the past, William would have asked Duque why they didn't just kill him in one go. However, the concepts of retreating in order to advance that he had just seen had strongly stimulated William's thoughts. The higher-ups of the alliance quickly reached a consensus to retreat first. Since they were allied forces, challenging the ancient god Thun was a huge matter. They would definitely go through thick and thin together. Even with a demigod like Duque overseeing things, there was still no guarantee. After all, no one knew to what extent Thun's strength had recovered, but from the two attacks Thun made, one of which sent Naxxramas flying and the other of which blew up a small part of Naxxramas, it was clear that the power of this ancient evil god was not complete. Of course, the alliance could directly charge into the lowest level of the Kiraj temple without waiting for the tribes. He might even be able to take advantage of Thun before he fully recovered. But so what if he won? They might be able to obtain some decent equipment, but who could guarantee that the alliance's experts wouldn't die? It was precisely because the alliance was stronger than the Horde in terms of both quantity and quality of experts, as well as national and military power, that the alliance was able to form an allied army. If the alliance sacrificed too much, it would only benefit the Horde. William suddenly understood why Duque wanted to retreat first. Duque smiled and turned to Jaina. Go out and inform the vanguard of the allied army to retreat immediately from the Wall of Beetles to the Divine Temple. At the same time, prepare to use continuous artillery fire 24 hours a day to cover the road from the Wall of Beetles to the Kiraj ruins. Almost as soon as the Alliance heroes returned to Naxxramas, the most terrifying insect swarm on record broke out in the Kiraj temple. Damn it! It's here again. On the floating fortress, all kinds of chaotic sounds drowned out everything. The sound of orders, angry curses, and then the loudest sound of artillery fire rang out. No one could figure out whether the sound of the artillery had alarmed the swarm, or whether the swarm had attracted the artillery fire. Almost at the same time as the artillery shells rained down on the Kiraj temple, insects the size of small trucks rushed out from every corner of the temple with their fangs and claws bared. They were like a black carpet that covered the entire ground, dyeing the yellow earth into a creepy, constantly shaking black color. They rushed out of the temple and formed a huge wall that was like a wave. They rushed forward crazily and quickly, even ignoring the cries of their companions. They stepped on their companions that ran slower to the bottom. Whether or not they would be trampled to death, no one knew. Originally, Varrock Salyafar didn't want to retreat because retreating meant that the Horde heroes led by Sal would be cut off. However, Duque's words dispelled his thoughts. Varrock, I don't doubt your loyalty to the chief at all, but it's not like you haven't seen an insect swarm before. How long do you think your army can last in front of this tide? Do you want to kill the last elites of the Horde? And as long as we kill all the insects, we can still get Sal and the others back. Don't worry, as long as Thun isn't beaten back to the depths of the planet, the interests of the Alliance and the Horde will be the same. Varrock was silent for a few seconds and finally nodded. The Horde retreated. The Alliance, with the convenience of Naxxramas, crazily opened fire on every isle in the direction of the Kiraj temple, every place that wasn't under the protection of Thun's power. The insects were charging without any regard for their own lives, and the Alliance's artillery was also covering the area. The swarm of insects that was originally like a surging black tide didn't even have time to form an interweaving turbulence before it was smashed to pieces by the Alliance's superior artillery. The entire world seemed to be filled with the light of the explosions. As the Cannon King of the Alliance, Bulang Bronzebeard methodically commanded Naxxramas. For ground attacks, prioritize the incendiary bombs, then the explosive bombs. For air attacks, don't stop the 3 types of bombs. Don't be afraid to run out of bombs. Sir Duke Marcus is already a demigod for mages. He will open a portal for us to replenish our ammunition. In the command center, after letting Khadgar help with the matter of the portal, Duke's focus fell on another place. He said to Varrock and Magni, "See? The range of Si Thun's power shield has shrunk." Yes. The two nodded at the same time. Originally, Si Thun could cover the entire Kiraj temple, but now it only covered the main hall of the temple. Other places, even if stray bullets flew over, it didn't matter. Why is that? Varrock was puzzled. Because our Alliance's hero squad first broke the pillar of the Kiraj temple. Duke raised his palm, and two souls that looked like little people appeared on his palm. Even though these two souls had been imprisoned by Duke, Varrock could still clearly feel the strong will and surging soul waves from these two souls. This is, the souls of the twin emperors. The emperor of the Kiraj insect people, and also the leader of the swarm. After losing them, Si Thun could no longer control the Kiraj insect people well, so he simply sent all the low-level insects to their deaths. Chapter 1325. To be honest, even Duke wasn't sure if the Kiraj insect people were Si Thun's biological sons. After all, in terms of race, they wouldn't even be able to pee in the same pot. The most common explanation was that when the Titans discovered Azeroth, the entire surface of the planet was about to be corrupted by the four ancient gods. The Titans were furious. After the boss of the Pantheon, Amon-Thel, personally destroyed the most powerful Yashaji, the Titans discovered that the ancient gods had already corroded the planet deeply. Killing the ancient gods would cause great damage to Azeroth. For the sake of Azeroth, a powerful Titan in the future, they created guardians and sent them to seal the ancient gods in Azeroth. However, these ancient gods didn't obediently give in. They were still hatching plans in the underground of Azeroth, ready to rule the world again at any time. Si Thun was defeated and sealed in a battle in Silithus. However, with the loss and confusion of the Guardian Liden, as well as the earth-shattering explosion and impact of the Well of Eternity, the Guardian's seal gradually weakened. He reappeared as the mastermind behind the Kiraj insect people. However, in all historical documents, only the Kiraj insect people were mentioned as Si Thun's servants. According to Si Thun's crazy personality, since he wanted to stall for time to recover from his injuries, servants were probably existences that could be abandoned at any time. At this thought, Duke had a new idea. Bulang, when this wave of insects is over, use the zero cannonball. Okay. Bulang replied. Zero cannonball? William was curious. There are many plants in this world that are more or less poisonous to insects. The most widely used ones are pyrethrum, rotina, and tobacco. The so-called zero cannonball is to cultivate a large number of these plants, grind them into powder, and then shoot them near the insect nest. As for how effective it is, it will have to be tested to know. Anyway, there are a lot of materials in the Ungoro crater in the east, Duque replied indifferently. It didn't matter if there was no effect. If there was a special effect in the test, it would be worth it. Although Si Thun didn't care about the insects, the Alliance and the Horde did. Even if they killed Si Thun, there might be another insect wave, and the whole of Kalimdor would have to kneel. It was not possible to form such a magnificent coalition army every time. As a transmigrator, Duque knew that Azeroth was full of trouble. William nodded heavily. I've learned a lot. After settling the chores, Duque came to the strange little space attached to Naxxramas. This place, which used to be the Frost Dragon's lair and the Temple of Kel Thuzad, had now become the core area of the stronghold. Unlike the main control area, this core area was mainly used to store valuables and serve as a refuge for VIPs. Thanks to the promotion of mold-based house construction, while the logistics force was busy transforming Naxxramas's defense and firepower, Du had the time to recruit a group of Storm City's Mason Brotherhood craftsmen to work on his own. It wasn't an exaggeration to build an exquisite 3-story palace for himself and the other kings in the original Frost Dragon's lair. Duke's own villa was a Duke level 2.5 stories. What was the result? 2.5 stories above and 3 stories below the ground, for a total of 5 stories. In this Duke's mansion, Duque set up a magic array. First, he summoned Khadgar, Alonso's, Thaddeus, and Farina. Then, Vanessa opened the door to welcome the guests. Seeing Alonso's fail, these guests, or helpers, all bowed their heads. Nice to meet you, teacher. Theon and Gavin Rad bowed their heads first, followed by Riataline and Benedettas, who were second in line, and then Sally Whitemane. He. I'm no longer a living person, so let's dispense with the customs of the mortal world. Alonso's was quite happy to see that his disciple was still active in the front line of fighting against evil. After some pleasantries, Duque went straight to the point. Since Thun is using all the insects to attack and stall for time, we won't be able to break into the deepest part of the Temple of Kiraj for a while. So, while the enemy is increasing in strength, we have to do something. My suggestion is to find a way to purify and absorb the souls of the twin emperors into the magic net as nodes of the magic net. At the same time, we can see if we can extract the divinity of the twin emperors and plant the seeds of divinity for those who are determined to break into the realm of gods. Hiss. Even though everyone knew that Duque had always been kind, no one really thought that Duque would take out the divinity as a trophy. In everyone's hearts, that was basically the absolute territory of the number 1 person in the alliance, Duque. And this time, even if Queen Sylvanas didn't participate in the fight against the twin emperors, Duque probably had a 70% to 80% chance of winning. Everyone was moved. Theon was even more respectful. I'm a straightforward person, and I rarely admire anyone. But I want to say, besides my teacher Fail and Wuther, you are the 3rd person I admire. Everyone offered words of praise. Duque waved his hand. Our fate is linked to Azeroth. If this planet is destroyed, Draenor is our role model. Even becoming a demigod is nothing to praise, as long as everyone remembers the saying, with great power comes great responsibility. They were all from the Alliance, so there was no need for formalities. Maybe if Azeroth collapsed, the Alliance could follow the example of the Horde, using the Dark Portal to roll to a certain planet and launch a desperate invasion. Victory could ensure the continuation of the race, but what about failure? The Horde was the best example. Thinking of this, every Alliance hero felt the same way. Duque continued, I'll skip the pleasantries and ask directly, who wants to plant the seeds of a demigod? This time, I expect to be able to extract 2 seeds. If you have the confidence, please come forward. There is a saying that goes, confidence may not necessarily win, but without confidence, you will definitely lose. Okay, who wants it first? There was such a thing as not passing on responsibility. Queen Sylvanas proudly stepped forward with her long bow on her back. Her long eyebrows were slightly raised, and she placed one hand on her hip. Her aura naturally spread out. The current alliance was said to be the 4 major races, but the dwarves were actually the vassals of the dwarves. Since the humans already had Duque, and the elves had Sylvanas, Magni also stepped forward with the Balrog hammer on his back. Count me in. Originally, William was also quite tempted, but after seeing Magni step forward, William smiled and didn't move. Duque waved his hand and took out the souls of the twin emperors. It wasn't an exaggeration. Different from the little surprise of Prophet Skyrim, the 2 demigod souls were Duque's biggest gain since attacking the Temple of Kiraj. Chapter 1326. Unfortunately, the souls of the twin emperors were symbiotic, and could not be separated and used separately. Of course, the difficulty of subduing them had more than doubled. If there were difficulties, they had to go up, and if there were no difficulties, they had to go up. It seemed like I said something wrong. Forget it, don't mind this little detail. In the next moment, the souls of the twin emperors separately emerged from the palms of Duque's hands. Emperor Vecnala's eyes widened, and he stared angrily at everything in front of him, but he immediately realized his powerlessness, because like his brother Emperor Vec-Lor, he had lost their demigod bodies, and became pure spiritual bodies. Yo, twin emperors, how are you feeling? Duque's face, in their vision, became immeasurably huge, and very much in need of a beating. They opened their mouths, but were shocked to find that they could only let out soundless roars. They tried to change everything, using all the power they could use to change the situation, but unfortunately, the soul prison had completely sealed off all their power. The only thing they could do now was to be prisoners, captives, and obediently wait here for the victor, Duque, to judge them. Duque gently tossed his hands up, and the two soul prisons rose slowly, until they were imprisoned in midair by the magic array. Duque snapped his fingers, and under everyone's gaze, the souls of the twin emperors began to grow, becoming the size of a dwarf. Twin emperors. Didn't you say that the victor gets everything? Now, as the victors, Duke Marcus and Sylvanus Windrunner, come enjoy our spoils of war. Duque pulled Queen Sylvanus over, and they stood side by side. Clearly, the faces of the twin emperors twitched in pain. What had been said not long ago still echoed in the ears of the four of them. The reward of the victor should not be discounted. The etiquette of the loser should be done to the extreme. Right. They had said so. However, that was both the emperor's reserve and pride, and the absolute confidence of the strong. True warriors never thought about the consequences of failure, because they never thought that they would fail. Admittedly, they could be as ugly as those captured mortals. For example, slamming the soul barrier in front of him with all his might. But this kind of thing, other than showing their helplessness, they would also lose their demeanor. They would not do it. Because to them, this kind of ugly behavior was even crueler than death. Although the twin emperors had already experienced the pain of their bodies being blown up alive by the most intense holy light in history, that was only the torture of mortal bodies. The real torture was on the soul. They had lost. The two brothers had actually lost to a mortal woman and a human demigod who had yet to unleash his full power. He once thought that they were incomparably powerful, second only to Si Thun's power, second only to Si Thun's perfection. They didn't even care about the other ancient gods who were as famous as Si Thun. But now, the cruel reality struck their worldview again and again. Anger. Hatred. Abomination. Even so, even though they gritted their teeth tightly, the twin emperors did not even need to speak. Their minds were connected, and they had already made their decision. The twin emperors echoed each other, "Speak. Winner. What spoils of war do you want?" Duque nodded. "The first thing I want is your divinity. I mean divinity that has been stripped of your will, leaving only the characteristics of combat and magic. The divinity of other gods was not so easy to take. Apart from representing power and energy, divinity also represented the will and characteristics of a god or a demigod. Especially the will. If the will left on the divinity was forcibly dispelled, the result would either be failure, and the will above would backfire, or it would be like Duque dealing with Prophet Skiram before, where the loss was huge, and it would be amazing if there was even one left after 2 points of divinity. If the other took the initiative to remove the divinity, that was another matter. Duque was not worried that the twin emperors would not give in. The biggest difference was not that there was no gain, but how much gain. Yes. The oath of the emperors will not be broken. Having said that, the twin emperors were very straightforward, and directly began to withdraw the will on their divinity. This was not a simple thing. Divinity, as the most important asset of a demigod, was usually eager to inject the largest and most resolute will into it, to prevent it from being seized by the enemy. Every demigod did everything possible to stamp their own mark on every corner of the divinity. Now to remove the will in their divinity, and in a state where they had lost their divine body and had no support, the difficulty and hardships could be imagined. Duque wanted to provide magical support, but was refused by the stubborn emperor. This process lasted for a full half an hour, during which no one spoke, quietly watching the twin emperors cast the spell. It was finally done. All right. Here. The emperor will fulfill his promise. The twin emperors, echoing each other, gave two big gifts. Under the system prompt, Duque clearly saw the label on it: melee non-attribute divinity 3 points, magic divinity 3 points, optional types, arcane, frost, fire, nature. A total of 6 points of divinity, and the twin emperors being so straightforward was also unexpected. Duque first carefully let the system check it, and after confirming that there were no problems, he made the second request. He hoped that the twin emperors would become his elemental emissary. Unexpectedly, it was rejected by the other party with incomparable firmness. No, there is no room for negotiation. Absolutely not. The emperor can lose his empire, can lose his subjects and wealth, and even lose his queen, but the emperor must never kneel to the enemy. Duque's eyes narrowed. Didn't you say that the winner gets everything? The twin emperors were obviously angry, and like a machine gun, they opened the chatterbox. The entire Kiraj insect people empire is the servant of the greatest god, Thun. This is the will that is imprinted in the depths of every insect person's soul, and absolutely cannot be changed. Your request, we can't do it. And our failure does not mean that we surrender. Even if you are the winner, you are not qualified to gain our loyalty. You will fail in the end. The Supreme Thun will lead the Kiraj insect people to occupy this world. That's right, humans, orcs, elves, trolls, whatever, are only worthy of being food for the Kiraj insect people. Feel lucky for your short victory. Your victory will end with the further awakening of our Lord Thun. Ha! Ha ha ha! They were obviously two losers, but they laughed wildly and wantonly like conquerors who had won a complete victory. Not only did they laugh, but they also used their spiritual power to show scenes of terrible cruelty with sound effects. Chapter 1327. That was when the Cenarian fortress had yet to be reactivated, and there was only a team of night elves guarding it. The insects that covered the mountains and plains easily flooded the entire fortress. No. Is the War of the Shifting Sands going to start again? The ones guarding the fortress were the night elves' most elite sentries. So what? They were too few in number. The sharp arrows easily pierced the skulls of the insects, and the arrows that penetrated the brain took the insect's life. Shoot one dead, and 3 more charged forward. Shoot 3 dead, and a swarm of them surged forward. They were already short on manpower, and the vast fortress defense line was not something that could be maintained by a mere 30 people. In the blink of an eye, the entire defense line was broken through. As the captain, the druid merely sent out an owl to send a message. The sturdy armor was easily pierced through by the sharp mouthparts of the giant insects, and with a ripping sound, the armor and the delicate limbs were torn apart like a piece of paper. Duran. Sherna, an elf couple, was instantly pushed away by the swarm of insects. The cruel insects did not kill them on the spot. Instead, they pierced their collarbones with their sharp horns and held them up high, facing each other, letting out a unique howl as if they were showing off. No, let her go. You can do whatever you want to me. Let her go. The strong Duran broke down. He cried and howled, begging the intelligent insects to let go of his lover. But all he got was the cruelest execution. The insects bit off their hands and feet one by one, swallowing and chewing them in front of each other. In the end, when their lower abdomens were bitten off, the couple, far away from home, breathed their last in each other's eyes of despair. Seeing this, Tyrande was already furious. Her whole body was trembling. Duque was silent. He gently pulled Tyrande over and held her in his arms. He raised his hand to stop the twin emperor's provocative performance, but was suddenly stopped by Tyrande. No. I want to see it to the end. It was not just her. Even though the faces of Queen Sylph and the other alliance champions were filled with anger, and even though their fists were already trembling from clenching too tightly, not a single person tried to stop the twin emperors. Sigh. Duque let out a long sigh. The scene changed to Thunder Cliff. A family of Tauren herdsmen were playing with their Kodo beasts that were as large as rhinoceroses. The swarm of insects had arrived. They came without any scruples. The brave Tauren father used the thick totem pole to smash the 3 insects to death. Then, his hands and feet were pierced by the long insect mouthparts and lifted up high. As the price for daring to resist the Karaj insect people, his punishment was that in front of him, the insects first ate his 2 sons who were 3 years old and 1 year old, then his lover. Finally, under the ferocious laughter of the leader of the Karaj insect people guards, he ordered the insects to dismember his body and eat him. What the father saw on his deathbed was the twisted heads of his wife and son. The scene changed again. At the Tree Shade Inn at the junction of the Dust Wallow Swamp and the Crossroads. Because of the wood trade between the Alliance and the Horde, this place became the most harmonious place for humans and beast men. Originally, this place was full of laughter. Even though both sides were armed with weapons, they were more like decorations. The heroic Theramore warriors dared to compete in drinking with the beast men who were 1 size bigger than them. They dared to arm wrestle with them. Even if they lost, they kept fighting. On everyone's faces, there was no longer any hatred in the past. When the swarm of insects arrived, everything changed. A huge number of flying insects drowned everything. The Alliance's artillery couldn't even fire 3 shots before the cannonier's head was cut off by the flying insects. On the simple arrow tower of the Horde, the troll thrower didn't even have time to throw a few javelins before the tower was knocked down by the giant insects the size of mammoths. He fell to the ground and was then swarmed by the insects and eaten. The humans and beast men who were once enemies stood back to back and launched a desperate counterattack against the swarm of insects. Everything was in vain. Blood stained every corner of the Tree Shade Inn. Every wall was brutally smashed through. Every wooden pillar was bitten off like a tooth-grinding toy. Every warrior or civilian, together with their armor, was swallowed alive. Regardless of race, regardless of identity, regardless of age, regardless of man or woman, old or weak, sick or disabled. Seeing this, the Alliance heroes present were already beyond furious. However, the twin emperors added fuel to the fire. The Karaji insects are the supreme rulers who rule this planet on behalf of our Lord. Just as you humans eat pigs, cows, chickens, and ducks, you lowly races are just food for us insect people. So don't be delusional. The noble insect people will never become your slaves. Until this moment, everyone finally understood. The twin emperors boasted of their nobility, but they were willing to concede defeat and give up their most precious divinity. But deep down, they didn't think that their race had failed, and they still boasted of being noble and unparalleled. How laughable and pathetic was this? They were obviously Thun slaves, but they were pretentious. They were clearly about to be exterminated, but they considered themselves to be masters. Suddenly, 2 golden lights fell from the top of the space. This was the holy light that the Alliance heroes were familiar with and comfortable with. For the twin emperors, this was acid, this was torture. Ah! It hurts. Unable to control themselves, the twin emperors screamed at the same time. The people led by Duque were dumbfounded, looking at the perpetrator. If it was Gavin Rad who couldn't help but make a move, Duque felt that it was normal. The problem was that the person who made a move was the former Archbishop of Holy Light, Alonso's Fail. Aren't you known to be kind? What about your three main virtues? The twin emperors laughed in pain. Ridiculous. Don't humans kill? Don't humans have instincts? Alonso said seriously with a straight face, the reason why intelligent creatures are intelligent creatures is that intelligent creatures have rationality. They know how to control their instincts, and not to indulge their instincts infinitely to trample on other intelligent creatures and strangle the living space of other creatures. Alonso's increased the punishment of the holy light while continuing, races that don't know how to live in peace with other intelligent races in the world and abuse natural resources wantonly will bring about their own destruction. As long as they are willing to repent, I can accept even their current tribe. Because they have learned how to get along with other races. But it is clear that the current Karaji insect people are not qualified to exist in the world of Azeroth. Duque was speechless. Archbishop, you are so domineering. Don't you think so? Could this be the legendary, monks don't lie, and if I say I will destroy your whole family, I will destroy your whole family? Or could it be that this is, monks don't kill, and, monks only kill familiar? Then, may I ask Archbishop, do you kill them after they are cooked or roasted? Chapter 1328. As Alonso said this, Duque smiled. As expected, this former Archbishop of the Holy Light was not a pedantic person who would not let go of benevolence and equality. If he was a blockhead, he would not have created the Paladin, a vicious profession that could fight, defend, and heal, despite having short legs. As a good friend and one of the biggest helpers on his path of growth, Duke naturally had to support Alonso's to the best of his abilities. Isn't it just a movie? I can do it too. Duque waved his hand, and a Hollywood-level explosion happened. A comet fell from the sky, and Tyrant showed what it meant to destroy your entire family. In front of this earth-shattering destructive power that only the strongest demigods or true gods could resist, all mortal powers were useless. A mushroom cloud rose. The ash hive exploded. Mushroom clouds rose one after another. The Zora hive and Rego hive were finished too. As the Emperor, he had never taken the low-level insects seriously. He could do whatever he wanted to the insects. But in front of the enemy, even the low-level insects could not be easily humiliated. Duque's actions were a slap to the face, and a resounding slap at that. Didn't you think that the insects were powerful? Didn't you say that the insects were the rulers of Azeroth? Why did they have to exterminate their entire clan? The death of each insect queen represented the destruction of a hive and a branch of the insect race. In the video, the number of insects killed and corpses collected by the Alliance and Horde Alliance was clearly shown. This kind of slap to the face with big data was crueler and more effective. Not only that, Duque also provided real-time combat footage. At this moment, outside, the Alliance's cannons shook the sky, and mushroom clouds of various sizes rose in the empty space in front of the Kiraj temple. Not only did the insects at the center of the explosion die without a complete corpse, but even those within the range of the shockwave were stabbed to death by the sharp claws or broken limbs of their comrades. In the air, there were not many insects that could escape the large-scale coverage of the Tyrant 3 bombs. Occasionally, a few of them managed to advance, but they had to face the barrage of magic bullets that poured down on them like a storm from the countless magic towers. If he was lucky enough to come over, there would be griffins and wyverns to intercept him at close range. It wasn't that there weren't any large bugs that tried to break through. There was one in the image that was as large as a train carriage that tried to break through. In the end, Onyxia, who was entrenched on the platform of the fortress, pounced on it. With a sweep of her dragon tail, it was smashed into pieces and fell to the ground. The twin emperors felt as if their hearts had been cut by a knife. The destruction of his clansmen was indeed heartbreaking. What Duque showed next were the scenes of Archimonde, Ragnaros, Nefarian, Onyxia, and other powerful figures being defeated or killed. Every scene was so soul-stirring that they were shocked speechless. If it was an ordinary blow, although it was painful, they believed that they would be able to endure it in the end. Even if they had to endure the punishment and torture of the holy light, they were confident that their souls would not fall. Unfortunately, what they saw now was the greatest pain for them, because they saw the possibility of their master, Xiaofan, being defeated. Xiaofan was not invincible. 25,000 years ago, he had been defeated once, and he had been defeated very, very badly. Not only was he seriously injured, but he was also completely sealed, locked in the deepest part of the earth like a dog. Our master might be defeated. Once this thought arose, it could not be extinguished. Their only goal now was to persevere and refuse to give in to Duque. Although even the twin emperors themselves did not know what the meaning of their perseverance was, Xiaofan was like a bright light in the dark, the last breath that supported their will. Duque's voice, which did not sound loud, was amplified by his divine power, almost 10 times louder than a loudspeaker. Every note shook the twin emperors' minds. Stupid and pitiful creatures who can't see the big picture. Don't you know that the existence in front of the wheel of history, no matter how great or small you are, will be completely crushed? This is fate. Fate was a very mysterious word. When someone was invincible, he was definitely a proud dragon, even daring to pierce through the sky. When he was defeated and depressed, this word was the most terrible and unsolvable curse, firmly binding his soul, with no hope of breaking free. Duque used the so-called fate to trick the Black Dragon Princess into becoming his mount after defeating her. When he had nothing to do, he would ride her for fun, and when he had something to do, he would ride her for battle. It felt so good. Now, Duque had used this trick on the twin emperors. Duque's voice carried endless majesty and a hint of temptation. Are you still stubborn? Do you still expect your master Xiaofan to turn the tables? This is ridiculous. The fate of Xiaofan's destruction has been decided. In a month at most, you can see Xiaofan's corpse. This time, not only did the twin emperors lose their voices, but even the alliance's powerhouses looked shocked. These words were too exaggerated. Impossible. You can't defeat our master. Not to mention the twin emperors, even the alliance's powerhouses were anxious for Duque. These words were too full of themselves. Even though Xiaofan had been seriously injured, he was still a true god. Originally, the alliance's attack on Courage was something they had no choice but to do. It wasn't easy for Duque to become a demigod, which gave everyone more confidence. In everyone's hearts, it would be good if they could grind Xiaofan to death or seal it again. Duque actually boasted that he could kill an ancient god in a month. Even if everyone knew that Duque wanted to subdue 2 true demigods, that was too exaggerated. Duque didn't care at all, and smiled with confidence. Twin emperors, why don't we make a bet? Duque's ambition was obvious, but the twin emperors couldn't be afraid. This was their last pride. Vecnala's face was cold. You're looking down on a true god too much. Vecnala's put on the same expression. This kind of bet that we will definitely win is meaningless. Duque still had his signature smile. I'm only asking you, do you dare or not? As you said and did, the winner gets everything. Within a month, as long as the Alliance, Horde, and Dragon's hero group cannot defeat Xiaofan, or do not dare to fight Xiaofan, I will naturally let you return to your master safely. At that time, if it wants to reconstruct your body or something else, I will not stop it. This bet could not be said to be small. As a price, the twin emperors naturally knew what they had to pay. The 2 brothers said in unison, as long as you or the Alliance can defeat our master Xiaofan within a month, we will be loyal to you, and the entire Courage insect people will become the Alliance's slaves. Whether you want to enslave or slaughter them all, we won't complain. Chapter 1329. This oath sounded ridiculous. It was simply at the level of the Arabian Nights. After calming down and thinking about it carefully, one would find that it was not only Duque's side who had this idea. Similarly, the twin emperors were not idiots. If what Duque showed the twin emperors was only the scene of the destruction of the 3 insect nests of Silithus, it was just a demonstration, then the scene of the insects coming out of the temple of An-Kiraj to make a death charge told the twin emperors another key. After they were killed, Thun was tired of these worthless servants of the Kiraj insect people. Outsiders could not see it, but as the insect people emperors, they could definitely see that in the charging swarm of insects, there were a large number of insects that were not qualified to be soldiers. No race would let their young go to the battlefield unless it was a matter of survival. Thun was burning the bridge after crossing it. This was the core reason that made the twin emperors angry and loosened their minds. With the help of the system, Duque saw the age structure of the insects, which was why he seemed to gamble. He seemed reckless and even boastful. If you thought about it carefully, you would know that there was no such thing as failure in Duque's dictionary. If the Alliance's hero group failed, then whether the souls of the twin emperors would be returned would naturally be decided by the victorious Thun. It was impossible for Duque to use Thun's servants to coerce Thun to let him go. If the Alliance won, then the twin emperors would undoubtedly find a new way to survive for the Kiraj insect people who were at the end of their rope. Of course, if the Alliance did not win, then naturally there was no need to mention anything. They did not overly force the twin emperors to make a decision now, and everyone dispersed after the twin emperors made their promise. Kalia asked, if we win against Thun, will we really accept those terrible insects? Duque smiled, are the orcs scary? Cruel? Kalia was suddenly enlightened. Yes, the orcs were also scary and cruel. These green-skinned humanoid monsters once ravaged the entire Eastern Kingdom, causing millions of deaths and injuries, plunging tens of millions of people into the flames of war, and bringing unforgettable terror and pain to all the major races of Azeroth. But now, these terrifying and cruel green-skinned creatures had become the allies of the entire Alliance. Was it funny? Was it worth hate and anger? Maybe, maybe not. In the face of the survival of an entire race, or even the entire planet, racial hatred was nothing. Thanks to the tireless propaganda and guidance of the various countries over the years, the people's hatred towards the orcs had been slightly reduced. At least until the new enemy was eliminated, the fuse would not be lit. This situation also applied to the Kiraj insect people. Those insects would be useful in many ways if they were used as mounts, Theon commented. Yes, such as rugged caves, Varian nodded. In the air, griffins could be used. On relatively flat ground, horses could be used. In cold forest areas, the elves' nightmares could be used. However, in rugged and complicated hot terrain, there was nothing more suitable than insects. Tyrant cleared her throat and emphasized, you'll need it. Don't forget that 10,000 years have passed. The Burning Legion, which once had hundreds of millions of demon warriors, has once again set their sights on Azeroth. 10,000 years ago, Duque's infernal affairs had inflicted heavy losses on the Burning Legion. 10,000 years was too long. No one knew what kind of terrifying combat power the Burning Legion had gathered in this period of time. In a sense, not just the insects, all intelligent creatures in Azeroth should unite to deal with the Burning Legion. The conversation between the few big shots of the Alliance made the others think. At this time, Edwin Van Cleef came over and bowed to Duque. Then, he said in a voice that everyone could hear, the Horde's heroes have just defeated Ayamis the Hunter, and are preparing to challenge Ozrian the Scarless tomorrow. Oh, not bad. Duque raised his eyebrows. Unfortunately, the losses are a little big. In the ruins of An-Kiraj, the Horde has so far lost 4 former members of the Silver Moon Parliament and 3 second-rate chiefs who were resurrected as Death Knights. Hearing this news, the expressions of the Alliance's heroes were very strange. As former enemies, even if they were not enemies now, seeing an enemy who had been killed almost 20 years ago come back to life and scare people again was a very complicated feeling. Moreover, Sar's method of absorbing a large number of undead into the horde had always made the Alliance's heroes feel disgusted. Now that those bones had been lost, from the Alliance's point of view, it was a loss of combat power. From the Alliance's point of view, it was no different from setting off firecrackers to celebrate. Duque turned to look at Tyrant. Tyrant immediately understood and ran to contact Fandral Staghelm. After a while, Tyrant returned. It's good news. Because Thun realized that he could not further corrode the earth, he has begun to recover his divine power. What it could collect was only the Lilian ego that it had plundered in the Silithus territory. This process will probably last for about 10 days. Duque said, Edwin, inform Sar of the situation. Let him do as he sees fit. No one was willing to fight an ancient god who had recovered better. Wait for more combat power? Launch an attack while the ancient god was weak before he recovered? This was a very difficult choice. There was no such thing as having the best of both worlds. The higher the level of a commander, the more painful choices they had to make in all kinds of unfavorable situations. Fortunately, while Thun was accumulating strength, the Alliance was not idle either. Duque split the 3 points of divinity from the sword Emperor Vecnala's into 3 portions. One was for Magni, one was for Servanas, and the last one was for him. Even though each portion did not actually have a single point of divinity, it was a special energy that contained divine power waves. And don't think that Vecnala's only knew how to use a sword. In reality, he was also one of Azeroth's specialties. Almost all the experts in this world were all-rounders. For example, Anduin Lothar could wield a 5-meter-long lance while riding a horse, shoot a squirrel's eye from 50 meters away with a bow while on horseback, and swing a 2-handed greatsword like it was child's play. What weapon he used to be famous was purely because he was most comfortable with it. Vecnala's archery was also very good. The experts of the Alliance were basically all in important positions. After witnessing the Twin Emperor's submissive bet, everyone dispersed. After Duque had arranged other matters, he could finally relax. Unknowingly, it was already late at night. In the villa in Naxxramas, Duque collapsed on the sofa, not wanting to move even half a finger. He was too tired. He had just become a demigod and had to rush over to save the day. Then there were all kinds of trivial matters. Suddenly, he heard a knock on the door. Come in. A beautiful figure flashed in front of the magic lamp at the door. Accompanied by a fragrant wind, a graceful blonde figure appeared in front of him. Huh. Chapter 1330. Speaking of which, there were a lot of things to do recently. He was either busy angering Kel Thuzad or advancing to demigod, so Duque hadn't had the time to be with his lover for a long time. Duque had some expectations. He thought that Servanas would attack him in a fit of excitement, and he also thought that Onyxia would come to court him, but he never thought that it would be her. She had been commanding and fighting on the front lines for a long time. Coupled with the agile fighting style of a ranger, her body fat content was extremely low, but she wasn't like the King Kong Barbie in the knights who swung their swords to the point of bursting with muscles. She only had a shallow waistline between her abdomen. She was slightly taller than most human women, and coupled with her full and firm Mount Hygel, which was illegal even among humans, she was the focal point of men no matter where she was. Her round and firm buttocks were full of elasticity, and her pair of fair and slender legs elevated her glamorous and aloof temperament to the extreme. Coupled with a full set of black stockings, underwear, high heels, and black gauze pajamas, are you trying to kill me? Duque made a muffled sound in his throat, and after a long time, he squeezed out a sentence from between his teeth. Aurelia? What? Why can't it be me? Don't you like me? Or is it that you're looking forward to someone else? With a smile, Aurelia put her left hand on her waist, showing off her proud S-shaped curves. She was very satisfied with her outfit that dazzled Duque. If you just looked at her from the neck up, you would think that she looked like a lady who was about to attend a grand ball with light makeup. However, when she gently took off the hairpin that held her hair in place at the back of her head and looked at her cascading blonde hair, you would think that she looked like a beautiful warhorse that was about to gallop with its front hooves raised high. Nobility, sexiness, wildness, these seemingly incompatible qualities perfectly blended together on Aurelia. "Darling." With a long, seductive voice, Aurelia slowly climbed up on her hands and feet. She swayed her body and showed Duque what a standard catwalk was. Mount Hygel displayed the violent beauty of mass and volume, which deeply stimulated Du's optic nerves. The chiffon pajamas slid across Duque's legs, making Duque shiver again and again. Unknowingly, Duque only knew how to swallow his saliva. Suddenly, he remembered that before he transmigrated, he had the Chilan arm mastery, and he had suffered a lot. The pain of not knowing the taste of meat really makes me cry just thinking about it. Hoo-hoo. Why are you so excited today? Duque asked Aurelia. Take a guess. Aurelia, who was usually gentle and generous, showed a rare kind of seductive slyness. For a moment, Duque almost thought that the person in front of him was Jaina and not Aurelia. However, seeing Aurelia's pointed and long elven ears trembling, Duque, who was familiar with her habits, knew that Aurelia must be hiding something from him, and it was usually not a big deal. Because as long as it was a big deal, she would definitely be open and honest. She would first deal with the big or business matters, and then deal with the small and personal matters. At this thought, Duque decided to tease Aurelia, and he suddenly put on a serious face. Aurelia. I just became a demigod, and my stamina, energy, and magic power are all greatly depleted. If there's nothing big, let's sleep peacefully tonight, okay? When Aurelia heard this, her face almost collapsed. It wasn't easy for me to make up my mind to put on the decisive underwear, but when it came to the last minute, you, Duque, actually said that you don't want to do it. Is she flirting with a blind man? However, in the next second, Duque burst into laughter. Since my dear sister Aurelia has such a refined interest, of course I will accompany you to death. However, I will have to trouble sister to put in more effort. Looking at Duque's smirk, Aurelia clearly saw that there was a demon tail on Duque's buttocks that should theoretically exist, wagging proudly. This guy is clearly ripping me off. Little rascal. She pouted, but the noble and beautiful female elf blushed and slowly lowered her body. A swordsman must be extremely familiar with his divine sword and scabbard. For something like the sword-drawing technique, if one did not maintain long-term practice, the speed and power of the sword would be greatly reduced. Duque was very surprised today. He had clearly displayed his invincible prowess, and the ferocious sword light could be said to be able to chill 19 continents with a single sword light, but Aurelia still fought with all her might. She charged at the start of the battle, and not only did she break his armor, she also directly used the freezing trap and raging flame trap. This almost caused Duque's sword aura to leak out, and he was defeated 1,000 miles away. After Duque stabilized his sword, he launched a continuous counterattack, using the tactic of attacking separately and jointly. He had clearly defeated her, but she still persisted in resisting. Usually, at this time, Aurelia would call for her sister to be her reinforcements. But today, she was not her usual self, and persisted in fighting against the great demon King Duque alone. What the hell was she doing? In the end, Sasha, who was outside the battlefield, could not help but join in the battle, and with Duque going easy on her, the battle ended in a draw. After the battle ended, Duque stroked the gold and silver heads, and asked in a kind voice, "What the hell were the two of you doing? It's time for you to tell me." Aurelia moved her head to make herself more comfortable on Duque's chest. "Nothing, I just want a child." "Okay." Sasha agreed with her sister. This was not because of the sudden silence that some people were most afraid of. It was just that Duque was a little stunned. Yes. It had been more than 20 years since he had transmigrated. Even if he was already in a state of eternal life, in theory, he should be considered an uncle. Aurelia had always wanted a child, and Duque knew that. He did not expect Sasha's wife-like nature to erupt at this time. Although he had always been very casual, it was also very important to make his woman happy. Then, Duque smiled. Silly, you have to tell me about this. I am no longer a mortal. If I do not inject my power and soul, there will be no result even if we fight 10,000 times. We were afraid that you would not agree, or that you hate children, so we joined forces to give you some sweets first. Okay. Sasha seemed to subconsciously draw circles on Duque's chest with her slender fingers. Are you blaming me for not agreeing? This time, it was Duque's turn to smirk. Alright, seeing that I quite like this dessert. With that, Duque extended his evil claws towards the trembling sisters. The sky was bright, the Windrunner sisters were still sleeping because they were extremely tired, but Duque could clearly feel that the continuation of his life and soul had already been nurtured in their bodies. Chapter 1331. A ranger's senses were very sharp. Aurelia, who had woken up first, immediately noticed the changes in herself. It was a new life that belonged to both her and Duque. In her lower abdomen, there was a wind elemental blessing of light and nature. Duque. Not knowing what to say, Aurelia hugged Duque tightly and kissed him passionately. After a long time, their lips parted. 10 months later, then, Duque gently pressed his index finger against his lover's red lips. 10 months definitely won't do. That means I'll lose you forever. This. He woke Sasha up as well. With Duque's explanation, the Windrunner sisters finally understood why 10 months wouldn't do. It wasn't like ordinary humans and high elves didn't have interracial love in the 2,800 years of the alliance between humans and elves. Not to mention the more recent ones, there was Gina Goldsword who had given birth to King Daelin Proudmoore's illegitimate daughter. Generally speaking, pregnancy was the same as a human's. The key was that Duque had already surpassed the limits of humans. If he wanted to give birth to a child, he had to abide by the laws of the world of Azeroth. The more powerful the existence at the top of the food chain, the more difficult it was to give birth to a similarly powerful descendant. This was quite demanding of parents. For example, Nethario, the Wing of Death, had slapped so many female black dragons and killed them all. Only the strongest Sinestra survived, which was why Nefarian and Onyxia, who were both demigods, were born. Similarly, Elun, the goddess of the moon, couldn't find a suitable true god as a partner. She could only marry the strongest demigod, Malorn, and give birth to the demigod Cenarius. Of course, the descendants of existences who had stepped into the realm of gods were more about the inheritance of power and energy, not ordinary reproduction. The most effective way was naturally for both sides to contribute a portion of their power or divine power and combine them together, so that their descendants could directly become demigods. It was not impossible to slack off. It was like pouring soy sauce into water. You could make do with whatever you wanted. If Duque didn't want his descendants to really do nothing, he had to put in more effort. From a mortal's point of view, Aurelia was very strong. It was a pity that Duque's soul was an oddity. Unless one became a demigod, it would be impossible for him to have any descendants. This indirectly increased the requirements. If a mortal woman wanted to give birth to a demigod, she would not be able to satisfy the energy needed for her offspring in minutes. She would die of exhaustion. Now that the war was imminent, and Aurelia and Sasha were unwilling to wait any longer, Duque could only purposely extend the incubation period. This would give his descendants more time to absorb energy and grow. What? At least 3 years? The Windstalker sisters' mouths pouted, so much so that a soy sauce bottle could be hung from it. Duque shrugged. It's already very fast, and that's taking into account that you have to stay in the magic array for a few days every month. It can't be helped. I'm a demigod of the magic element, and most of my children are magic element as well. If I don't replenish enough magic element, just relying on your own elemental absorption ability won't be enough. Oh, also, you are forbidden from participating in Thun's upcoming battle. I don't want the Mediv incident to happen again. Azeroth can't afford another dark portal incident. The Windrunner sisters opened their mouths. They were in pain and helplessness. Aegwynn had claimed to have killed Sargeras, but in the end, she found out that Sargeras' soul had run into her stomach and taken over her son's soul. That was how the dark portal incident happened. If there was a precedent, and someone killed Thun and was possessed by Thun, that would be a waste of their intelligence. It would be too tragic. Duque, is there any other way? Sasha asked weakly. There is. Don't have children before the world is at peace. No. We must have children. Aurelia and Sasha said at the same time. Then, they entered a magical grieving mode. It's over. We can't go to the battlefield for 3 years. My bow and arrows. The days when I couldn't sleep and went to the void battlefield to hunt, everything is for the children. Sob, sob, sob. The two sisters hugged each other. The scene was unbearable to look at. They even warned Duque fiercely not to have any thoughts of getting them to abort the children. Otherwise, they would fall out with Duque. All right. You chose the path. Duque sighed. He rubbed his brows and left the room. Women became mothers the moment they became pregnant, but it was a long and slow process for men to become fathers. Men would not feel like they had children if they did not see their children jumping around and demolishing houses. Duque was very busy. After a rare peaceful sleep, he had no choice but to turn on his daily work mode the next morning. The adjustments to the weave had not been completed, and there were many things that Khadgar could not decide. He could only ask Duque. After the Twin Emperors reached a tacit agreement with him, things like the Twin Emperors being captured began to happen, causing their control over the insectoids to decline. For example, in a coincidental situation, some people in the Alliance found that as long as they held a kind of crystal that was nicknamed Insectoid Crystal, they could summon a four-legged insectoid of the same color. With a thought, as long as they were willing to wait, it would not take long for the insectoid to run over and wait for orders. Not only were they willing to be mounts, but they would also obey orders even if they were told to attack their own kind. Of course, these insectoids that could be used as mounts did not have much combat power, and were only slightly better than human militias. When faced with formally trained warriors, their fragile long legs that could be easily cut off by standard steel swords were not enough. Even so, it was a wonderful experience. A few days ago, the two great formations that were still fighting to the death and would not stop until one side was dead had now completely surrendered. After noon, Duque had his lunch. When he finished patrolling Naxxrama's fortress and returned to the main control room, he found that many women were looking at him strangely, and most of them were high elves. Some had seductive looks, as if they wanted to swallow him up. Some were shy and unbearable, but also seemed to be unable to restrain their curiosity, not daring to look at him, but glancing at him from time to time. Duque had a headache. After returning to his office, he saw that no one was around and pulled Vanessa over. Hey! What the hell is going on today? Why is every woman looking at me strangely? Woo woo woo. You finally can't stand it? Marcus the Beast Duke, oh, Your Majesty the Beast Demigod Marcus. You finally can't control your beastly nature, and you want to lay your hands on your lovely and gentle maid? Woo woo woo, although I used to be lucky and thought that you still had humanity and conscience, I didn't expect, Woo woo woo, Vanessa rubbed her eyes with her hands and howled dryly. Looking at his maid's instant acting, and then looking at his bastard chicken leg staff, 3 crows suddenly appeared. Caw, caw, caw. Duque felt an unusual pain in the ass. Damn it. I don't know if I should say something. Chapter 1332. Damn it, don't tease me. What exactly happened? Tell me quickly. Veins popped up on Duque's forehead, and he looked like he was about to eat someone alive. Seeing how anxious her master was, Vanessa giggled heartlessly. Looks like, my dear master, even though you've left your mortal body and become a demigod, you're still that beast of a duke. Alright, I'll stop teasing you. Seeing that Duque was really going to flip out, Vanessa stopped while she was ahead. It was Lady Aurelia's suggestion. Aurelia? What about her? Duque was stunned. Nothing, because Lady Aurelia is pregnant with your child. After telling His Majesty Sylvanus, His Majesty Sin Dorii hinted that she wanted to focus on becoming a demigod, so he won't stop the other beauties in the Alliance from pursuing you. Wait a minute. Why can't I understand this kind of dazzling operation? That was the expression of the dumbfounded Duque. A second later, Duque laughed involuntarily. He recalled that he had the reputation of being a playboy in the Alliance. In recent years, there had been a lot less women, and the biggest reason was because Queen Sylvanus used her aura to protect him. With a valiant temperament and sharp eyes, the 3 Windrunner sisters accompanied him on all kinds of occasions with an aura that made others shrink back. They were originally great beauties that were 1 in a million. They had received the complete training of nobility, and with the perfect figure unique to the High Elves, as well as the battlefield achievements that made mortal women tremble in fear. The 3 sisters were the most unique scenery in all the Alliance gatherings. In terms of beauty alone, there might be some noble ladies in the Alliance who could approach their level, but with the addition of Sylvana's status as the queen, it was enough to make all mortal women despair. Those with beauty did not have the status. Those with the status did not have the ability. Even if there were all 3, the 3 of them were together, and the addition of the beautiful sisters was terrifying. If they did not nod, who would dare say that they would definitely be able to get a place in Duque's harem? Naturally, the Windrunner sisters brushed off all the beauties who failed in their eyes. Duque had a strange expression on his face. Then why did Sylvanus suddenly? Vanessa sighed. It's all because I'm afraid you'll mess around. Don't you think about who you've pushed down recently? Who can stop you if your taste goes crazy? His Majesty wasn't too willing at first, but Lady Aurelia persuaded him to think of Cenarius, and His Majesty immediately agreed. Yes, yes, the goddess and the white deer demigod, and then the goddess gave birth to the forest demigod Cenarius in the form of a centaur. Just imagining such a scene was very dirty. As a transmigrator, Duque could not help but think about it. In Greek mythology, how did Zeus, the most unscientific geneticist in history, create the Tauron? How did his brother, Poseidon, create so many sea monsters? Please listen to the story of Zeus the bulldozer. Duque choked. He really spat it out. At the end of the day, it was all his fault. At the end of the day, it was all because he played dragon taming with Onyxia on a whim. Alright, although she was in human form when she tamed the dragon, no one would forget her identity as the Black Dragon Princess. Oh my god. So I've already embarked on the path of no return for the beastly Duke? Duque suddenly found that his life had become gloomy. Caw, caw, caw. The crows on a tiche cawed again. For some reason, in Duque's ears, it became, HQ, HQ. Discovered a pervert. Now under arrest. No, actually, my taste is very normal. Duque swore in front of Miss Vanessa, the representative of the grand jury. Really? Duque did not notice the craftiness in Vanessa's eyes. Really? Duque raised 3 fingers and swore, as long as it's a good-looking beauty, I like it. Really? Then, shall we play a little game? What game? Take a guess, how many, fan of knives, throwing knives do I have hidden down there? Vanessa threw out the question, and then, with an elegant ladylike bow, she lifted the hem of her skirt with both hands. As a transmigrator who was deeply poisoned by Japanese culture, Duque deeply hated the traditional black, thick, and monotonous maid uniform in Azeroth's aristocratic mansions. As early as 10 years ago, Duque had already developed the standard maid uniform in the anime style. The maid uniform was black with white flowers. There was a black and white butterfly tie, and below it was a low-cut, deep V-neckline. However, the parts that were supposed to be exposed were covered by a hazy white muslin. The lower abdomen was a 3-row white muslin binding design at the top, middle, and bottom. The back was a breathable lace carving design, and the back was a large white bow at the back. The skirt was made of soft satin, matched with white lace at the hem. To reduce temptation, it was a mid-skirt design that went past the knees. However, the hem of the skirt seemed to be rising higher and higher. As expected, the long tube of translucent black stockings was evil. Now, Duque's eyes could not move away at all. The long skirt swayed rhythmically, one left, one right, one left, one right, inch by inch, as if it was some kind of evil rhythm, tugging at Duke's heartstrings, inch by inch, as if it had become some kind of evil rhythm. Gulp. This was the sound of someone swallowing saliva. Finally, it reached the end of the long tube of black stockings. He saw it. He was almost there. That was the black silk suspender to prevent the stockings from slipping off. He saw it. Of course, there were no flying knives. Yo, my dear master, you still haven't guessed it? Vanessa's eyes were like silk, and she leaned slightly closer to Duque. But with this leaning, Duque immediately realized that the maid in front of him was no longer the maid that her father had thrown over to be a maid, the one that could not do anything well. Instead, she was a mature and charming woman that he had bestowed eternal life and youth. Even though she said that, her hands didn't stop lifting her skirt. Hey, my master, do you really not have any speech to express? Speech? Yes. Of course there was. Not to mention speech, I can even make a freestyle for you. The problem is that that thing is too simple. It would be embarrassing for me, a demigod, to say it. With a thought, Duque opened his mouth and said, Guan Guan Jujiu, in the state of the river. A fair and graceful lady, a gentleman's desire. This passage of classical Chinese from Transmigration was enough to make Vanessa choke to death. She was dumbfounded. Looking at her face full of question marks, Duque felt smug in his heart. He. Your master, has finally turned the tables. Do you really want to know? Do you really want to know? I won't tell you. You want me to say something human? Sure. There were only 6 words, black. Lace. F***ck. Of course, Vanessa knew that Duque was counterattacking. After a short moment of panic, she was not angry. Instead, she directly revealed the mystery, clang clang. Pfft. Duque spat out a mouthful of old blood and gritted his teeth. You tricked me. Why? Safety pants and whatnot. It was all F***king evil. Chapter 1333. The leader was angry. Oh, no, Duque was angry. The anger of a demigod was very scary. Duque roared on the spot and was about to grab Vanessa. He didn't care about the consequences, he would beat her on the ass first. Ha ha ha. What evil, you're clearly a beast, Duke. You're thinking the wrong way. Facing Duque's pounce, Vanessa nimbly lowered her body and easily dodged him like a slippery eel. Forced stealth, and, sprint, she ran out like a wisp of smoke. Unless Duque was serious, he wouldn't be able to catch a hero-level thief who only wanted to run. Just you wait. Don't let me catch you. At the gate, Duque made a declaration like a big villain. In the next second, Duque's face and posture froze as if he had been petrified. He suddenly realized that beside the gate, his other maid, Solarian, was standing there with a smile on her face. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Master, you don't have to apologize to a little maid. Solarian nodded lightly with a smile. Duque looked Solarian up and down. Seeing that the master astromancer was normal, he couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. What, master? Do you want me to be like other girls and cut my skirt a few inches shorter, or open my collar a few inches, and then secretly wear the so-called winning underwear? Solarian's smile widened. Please don't. Duque's face fell. I'm so happy. It seems that after becoming a mage and demigod master, you're still the gentleman you used to be. Solarian seemed a little excited. Duque was a little embarrassed. He didn't know if he should tell her that before he transmigrated, the word gentleman was synonymous with pervert. Duque face-bombed. I'm also very happy. At least there's a normal woman by my side. Not really. My family also sent word that I can successfully conceive your child, master, Solarian said calmly. Pfft. Duque burst out laughing. Is it that surprising? In Cuel Salis, commoners without magic talent always hoped to give their daughters to noble mages. As long as they could give birth to a boy or a girl with magic talent, they would be lucky. In the eyes of the High Elves, only by mastering magic could one change one's fate. Even great nobles with noble bloodlines would hope to marry into other great mage families so that their descendants would have a greater chance of becoming Silver Moon counselors. Please note that even after Her Majesty Sylvanas Windrunner ascended to the throne, this practice is still deeply rooted among the Blood Elves. After listening to Solarian's explanation, Duque more or less understood why the elven girls were suddenly so enthusiastic. The High Elves were originally magic maniacs. After splitting from the Night Elves, they had been worshipping the spellcasters for 8,000 years. Even though the Sin Dorii kingdom was now ruled by rangers, how could the customs of 8,000 years be changed so easily? But Duque couldn't figure out what Queen Sylvanas was thinking. What about you? What do you think? Duque asked, as if he was possessed by some supernatural being. I don't know. Maybe when the time comes, I won't refuse. Not refusing might not necessarily be willing. Is it because of Kale that's? Sigh, I haven't paid attention to him for a long time. Please don't misunderstand, master. From the moment I swore allegiance to you, I no longer have anything to do with Kale that's. He is more like a beautiful vision of my childhood, a dream that is destined to never come true. I have accepted my fate, and I am doing well now. After a pause, Solarian continued, of course, if you want me to kill Kale that's, I will do it. After all, when that day comes, Kale that's will probably have committed an unforgivable crime for the Alliance. But I think when I do it, I will probably hesitate. Duque was a little surprised, but also a little relieved. This was human nature. This was the Solarian of flesh and blood, and not the Solarian that Duque had in mind. The Solarian that should only appear in the Storm Fortress, with no backstory at all. She was like a boss that was made out of paper. Phew. Thank you for your honesty. Duque smiled, waved his hand, and then ran to find Queen Sylvanas. Looking at Duque's back, Solarian seemed to be lost in thought. On the other hand, perhaps it was the so-called, no comparison, no harm. When Thrall, who was fighting in the ruins of An-Kiraj, heard the news from the Alliance through the undead thief messenger, the expression on his face was very interesting. What? They didn't lose much, and they have already taken care of the other leaders of the Kiraj temple. They are resting while waiting for us to finish here, and then besiege Thun. At this time, Orgrim walked in front of Thrall, and his voice rumbled. There is no need to worry, Thrall. As a great chief, figure out what you can do and what you can do well. If you can understand this, you are an outstanding chief. Thrall sighed. Just being outstanding is not enough. In peacetime, an outstanding leader was generally enough to close the gap with a rival country. Unfortunately, this was wartime, and any small gap could be infinitely magnified. The tribe originally had fewer strong people than the Alliance, and it was not easy for them to accept the Forgotten Ones and slightly close the gap with the Alliance. Suddenly, there was news that the commander of the Alliance, Duke Marcus, had become a demigod. In comparison, the tribe had suffered heavy losses in the ruins of Kiraj, which was even weaker. Although the Forsaken were dead, the dead could not die a second time. If he was killed again, then his body and soul would be destroyed in the truest sense. Even Anastrian, as the leader of the Forgotten Ones, could not find a good way. Even if they lost a second-rate chief who had become an undead warrior and a former Silver Moon counselor who had become a lich, it was still a great loss. In fact, the Sun King's face was gloomy. After being ruthlessly expelled from the Eastern Kingdom by the Alliance, the Forgotten Ones had lost a stable source of troops. Originally, they hoped that after joining the tribe, Thrall would allow the Forgotten Ones to resurrect new Forgotten Ones from the dead tribe warriors. Who knew that Thrall would begin to believe in the way of nature and firmly rejected him? Not only that, even Orgrim, who was theoretically his subordinate, was on Thrall's side. Anastrian's gaze became even colder. Fortunately, he was a dead man. No matter when, his body was filled with shadow energy and did not further decay, it was still full of a dark aura. No one noticed the change in his gaze. At this time, Orgrim patted Thrall's shoulder. Don't think too much. The tribe should do its own thing first. We must first not make mistakes, then wait for the real opportunity to come. Chapter 1334. After the Alliance Hero Squad had rested for a full 5 days, the Horde Hero Squad finally succeeded in killing Audrian the Scarless at the cost of 3 second-rate chiefs who had turned into undead warriors and 2 high-grade druids. Sal was not satisfied with the result because the losses were too great. But he couldn't complain. Compared to the Alliance, the Horde obviously lacked healing methods. The druids from Thunder Cliff and the shamans trained by Orgrimmar were second-rate. Obviously, in terms of healing, the Alliance's priests and paladins were better. Moreover, the undead couldn't use natural healing spells, so they had to rely on the third-rate undead priests, dark healing, magic. Whether they admitted it or not, the Alliance's heroes were far better than the Horde in terms of endurance. Cain refused to go into the arms of the Forgotten after the death of the Tauren Druid, and because of this, he had a bad relationship with Anastrian. Sal was now twice as big as his head. Fortunately, the spoils of war dropped by Audrian slightly diluted this faint sadness. This hammer is good, I want it. Orgrimmar had his eyes on the frosted warhammer that Audrian dropped. Compared to the semi-artifact, Hammer of Destruction, that he used before, this thing was a transitional item, except for the fact that the hammer head was square and looked like the Hammer of Destruction. Sal's mouth twitched, as if he wanted to say something. Orgrimmar patted Sal on the shoulder and said, "A dead man should look like a dead man. I'm already very happy to be able to jump out of the graveyard and continue to fight for the Horde. If I wanted the Hammer of Destruction back, should have taken that thing to the grave instead of passing it on to you." "Thank you," Sal said heavily. His cold hand patted Sal on the shoulder and Orgrimmar smiled and said, "You have done very well. The young great chief. This was an undeniable victory. We should be laughing." Shouldn't we? Yes. Sal was halfway through his words when his face suddenly changed. Not only him, but the entire Horde hero group was in shock. The earth was trembling. Something huge was breaking out of the ground. In Naxxramas, various alarms were blaring. Even though the floating fortress wouldn't be affected by the tremors of the ground, the elemental waves that were as strong as tsunamis still surged over, causing the entire fortress to sway like a lone boat in the middle of a stormy sea. Duque's voice echoed throughout the fortress. Open the protective shield. Lower the altitude. Move the fortress to the north. Close all the cannons and protective doors. Grab onto something that can stabilize your body and resist the impact. Naxxramas, who was thousands of meters in the air, was already in such a sorry state, let alone the frontline soldiers. Even if Duque had expected Thun to erupt and withdrew the coalition forces at the Beetle Wall, the Beetle Gate could not be left undefended, so he still arranged a 1,000-man brigade there. However, a few kilometers to the north of the Beetle platform, there was a 30,000-strong mechanized army. The soldiers were all sitting on the steam-tracked armored vehicles during shifts, and they could attack or retreat as they pleased. From the looks of it, the 1,000-man team was doomed. The earth was roaring, and tens of thousands of tons of boulders arched up under the evil power, breaking through the sea of sand and floating to the ground. One by one, the sand dunes rose high and then exploded like bombs, sending rocks flying in all directions. The coalition soldiers only saw a blur, and countless disgusting tentacles, like sharp knives piercing through a piece of paper, grew out of the sea of sand. These tentacles, with terrifying giant white hooks on their tips, or a large, disgusting eyeball, spun and pounced on every coalition soldier. The soldiers who had no time to react were easily pierced through, or their whole bodies were torn into several pieces like a piece of paper. Those disgusting tentacles with a large number of barbs on the surface were already frightening enough. There were also a large number of eyeball tentacles, using their purple-white eyeballs to emit terrifying blue rays. The damage wasn't fatal, but this ray, which was similar to mental whip, brought great pain to every soldier who was hit. Ah, no. What is this? Fight back. Fight back. To be honest, artillery at close range was a tragedy. But the coalition soldiers had no choice, and their swords could hardly cause any damage to these tentacles. On the contrary, as long as they hesitated, it was likely that they would be carried into the depths of the earth together with the tank. The huge pit, like a whirlpool, swallowed countless coalition soldiers. Was there a huge mouth with countless teeth under the quicksand? Or was it a wriggling mouth? In grief and panic, the soldiers had no time to think. But everyone knew that this should be the ancient god Thun that the higher-ups of the Alliance had repeatedly emphasized. Every soldier guarding the Beetle Gate had been informed of the risks here in advance, and they had even left a suicide note at the request of the commander. They couldn't accept it. They were the best soldiers of the Alliance and the Horde. They took turns to guard, maintaining the highest vigilance, but still couldn't do anything, and were one-sidedly slaughtered. It wasn't that Duque didn't prepare a way out for them. More than 20 portals were open there 24 hours a day. Regardless of day or night, there were 3 platoons of Griffin Knights, Hippogriffs, or Wyverns in the sky to receive them at any time. But everything happened too quickly, and almost in an instant, all the portals were destroyed, and all the aerial knights were shot down by the tentacles. At this point, since there was no way out, many people mustered up all their courage, roared, and rushed towards the wriggling tentacles with mortar shells or explosives. Boom! 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 Explosions rang out continuously. When Duque reacted and opened a new portal to receive them, only 68 out of a full team of 1,000 returned, and most of them were left with lifelong disabilities. Duque was silent, and his face was ashen. He knew how terrifying Thun was, but Jaina gently pulled Duque's hand. Don't blame yourself, you've already done very well. Varrock Salyafar stood at the side with an agitated expression. His long fangs were clenched, and his green face seemed to have turned a dark green. Magni was the most agitated. Because they wanted to retreat at any time, this team of 1,000 was the most mechanized, which also meant that the ratio of dwarves was the highest. He walked over, and his heavy armor made his steps seem even heavier. Duque, I'm only asking you, we waited for 5 days. Was it worth it? Magni wasn't questioning Duque's decision. Actually, he was the same as many of the Alliance's powerhouses. He didn't understand why Duque had waited for 5 days. If waiting for the Horde's powerhouses was a bonus of 1, but Si Thun's strength was a bonus of 10, then he might as well go and fight Si Thun right from the start after killing the twin emperors. Duque couldn't tell Magni the answer, but his eyes shone with determination. He only answered Magni with one word, worth it. Chapter 1335. Magni smiled. It was a bitter smile. That's good. Then my old brother can rest in peace. No wonder Magni was so excited. The more dangerous the mission, the more elite the troops. Dwarves might seem to be good at fighting, but they were actually built up over time. Dwarves had very long lives. Although they couldn't compare to elves, they could live for a few hundred years. Those who were lost this time were all old brothers who had been with Magni for many years. It had been 20 years since the second battle of the Dark Portal. Not to mention personal relationships, even if it was just a simple superior-subordinate relationship, the death of so many highly mechanized elite veterans would still be heartbroken. They had to defend against the Beetle Gate. If they just used bugs to rush out like before, Silithus would be covered in bugs, and that would be hard to clean up. This was the dilemma of the commander. Duque sighed. Bulang, after confirming that Naxxramas is safe, cover it with artillery. Even if we can't kill Si Thun, don't let its tentacles grow endlessly. Understood. The third brother of the Bronzebeard family nodded. Very soon, the entire fortress was filled with the sound of artillery. Naxxramas, the Heavenbreaker, and many other flying battleships used violent artillery shells to cover the entire north side of the Ankh-Kiraj temple. Did you notice? Magni asked 2 minutes later. Looking at the temple roof that had exploded in the artillery fire and the huge pillars that had collapsed, Duque replied, yes, the divine power shield has disappeared. The enemy's defense had weakened, which wasn't necessarily a good thing. The biggest possibility was that Si Thun had always had excess divine power to protect the entire territory. If it was compared to loosening 5 fingers in an attempt to grab the enemy's fist, now it was like pulling back all 5 fingers and clenching them into a fist, ready to fight against the allied forces. At this time, an orc messenger ran into the command center. The Great Chief and the others are back. Almost as soon as he finished speaking, the door of the command center opened again. Under the salute of 12 Alliance and Horde guards, the burly Horde men returned. Duque, how is the situation? The tribe can attack at any time. Sal's face was filled with exhaustion, but his eyes were still shining. Grom and Kane, who had worked with Duque before, felt the same way. Even though Grom only had one arm left, he still had the strength to wield Bloodhowl. Duque smiled. Warriors of the tribe, you need to rest. Grom stepped forward. Just as he was about to speak, Duque gestured for him to keep quiet. I don't mean to underestimate the tribe's powerhouses, but Si Thun's momentum is at its peak. Is it appropriate for us to clash head-on with them? Was it appropriate? Of course not. Even if they joined forces, the Allied forces would still be the weaker side. After all, Si Thun was still a true god. Duque ignored the reactions of the experts in the tribe and turned around. Tyrant, I'll have to trouble you for the next 2 days. You don't have to use your full strength. Just use the small, starfall, to get rid of all the tentacles that it's growing out. Understood. Tyrant combed her hair and nodded. To control such a huge meteorite with such a ridiculous mass and kinetic energy, Tyrant obviously needed to expend a lot of energy. But ordinary, starfall, could be fired every 10 minutes as long as she had Alun's divine power to replenish it, let alone once every 8 hours. Duque looked at Sal again. I have confidence in doing this. Please forgive me for not being able to tell you right now. Right now, the warriors of the tribe need to rest. 1 day is not enough. At least 3 days. Sal did not waste any time and directly agreed. Okay. On the 4th day, we will gather to kill the god. Sal stretched out his green hand that was even bigger than a bear's paw. Duque smiled and shook hands with Sal. This was a historic handshake. At this moment, no one realized what this handshake meant. It had to be said that Duque was very kind. The warriors of the tribe had just finished fighting in the ruins of Kiraj. If they directly followed the alliance to fight Thun, it would be a great victory. No one could estimate the losses that would follow. After all, at this moment, most of the warriors of the tribe were injured. The wounds could be repaired with nature magic or holy light. What about the lost physical strength, spirit, and blood? Anyone who overdrew their energy from strenuous exercise would be tired that night and would not have any energy the next day. Duque gave them a full 3 days of rest, which was very rare for the warriors of the tribe. In order to ensure the quality of their rest, they were even placed in an independent space in the center of Naxxramas, enjoying a quiet holiday without listening to the sound of gunfire all day long. 4 days later, on April 1st, year 22 of the Dark Portal, a day that was a bit funny for the travelers, the Allied forces attacked. 3 consecutive days of carpet bombing turned the entire Kiraj temple into ruins. Thun tried to fight back, but Bulang made full use of the range of the cannons and kept teasing Thun at least 5,000 meters away from the edge of the Kiraj temple. Now, there were basically no tentacles on the surface of the temple ruins. Let's go. Under Duque's order, the alliance, the tribe, and a certain black dragon princess in human form, a total of 40 people set off from Naxxramas on a pure-blooded firehawk. They set off in the early morning and rushed straight into the huge hole created by the collapse of the entrance of the Kiraj temple. Almost as soon as they entered the hole, Duque and the others received a grand welcome. Countless tentacles broke through the rock stratum and appeared around the dark cave walls. They writhed madly with their claws and fangs bared. Looking from afar, the blurry writhing in the darkness was accompanied by a terrifying sound, which made many heroines feel numb. Damn it! Why does it seem like we've lost our minds and sent ourselves into Thun's mouth as snacks? Gavin Rad complained fiercely. Actually, it's pretty much the same, Duque replied casually. If you knew later that many people had the chance to be swallowed into Thun's stomach and fight for their lives, would you be furious? Duque didn't tell them all about this strategy, because apart from the ancient titans, no one really had the experience of fighting Thun. In particular, he didn't want to use the theory of fate that he had used to scare people into recruiting underlings on the tribe. As the pure-blooded firehawk descended, suddenly, a rock wall in the 12 o'clock direction of the main force exploded. Jaina raised her hand, and several elemental light bullets shot in that direction. The exploding fire elements lit up the area as if it were daytime. A monster in the shape of a big earthworm with a huge mouth jumped out. Auro! Gavin Rad was shocked. No! It's even smaller. Queen Sylvanas had sharp eyes and immediately determined that the size was wrong. Bah! We've even killed its old man. Why would we be afraid of a small one? Chapter 1336. That being said, everyone was descending quickly on the pure-blooded firehawks. How to deal with this big guy was definitely a problem. It would definitely be a joke if the main force went over. Apart from Kudrin Wildhammer, no one in the Allied army was good at aerial combat. The pure-blooded Firehawk's flames were really not enough against this huge monster that was at least 100 or 200 meters long. The huge earthworm bared its fangs and pounced over, bringing with it a large amount of rubble as it came crashing down with the momentum of a collapsing mountain. Under the illumination of the flares, everyone could clearly see that the squirming mouth was like a dense concentric circle from the outside to the inside. Each circle was made up of countless sharp teeth. It was not hard to imagine that if anyone was swallowed, they would definitely be torn into countless pieces in an instant. A few of the heroines shuddered. Just when everyone thought that Duque would send out Onyxia, Duque casually waved his hand. 5 seemingly small fireballs appeared out of thin air and shot straight at the monster's lower jaw. The 5 fireballs were aimed at the back half of the circular mouth. The 5 dots were very clear. If it was his first time meeting this guy, Duque might be flustered. However, after killing Oro in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, Duque had already figured out the physiological structure of the entire Oro family. Strictly speaking, Oro was very similar to an earthworm, a low-level annelid. This type of annelid usually had multiple hearts. This kind of immature little Oro had a thick blood vessel on its back and abdomen. In the middle were 5 pairs of swollen blood vessels that were connected, and these blood vessels could beat rhythmically. By beating, blood could circulate throughout the body. For safety, it was also covered with a thick annelid shell. However, with the system scan, Duque had already calculated the rough defense of this hard shell. The 5 fireballs made a big turn in the air, drawing out a clear hook-shaped trajectory, and finally shot into the opening of the shell without hesitation. The 5 small fireballs entered little Oro's body. It did not seem to have any effect, but everyone noticed that the huge earthworm monster's body stiffened. Its body still maintained its pouncing posture, but that was due to the momentum from before. In less than 2 seconds, 5 heavy, muffled sounds came from all 5 places at the same time. 5 huge spurts of pus and blood splattered down, almost drenching the faces of everyone in the hero group. Wind. Gavin, Rad and Servanas moved at the same time, using a gust of wind to blow away the pus and blood that was gushing over. The strong corrosive pus and blood splashed on the rock wall in the opposite direction in the strong wind, and even corroded many of Thun's small tentacles. Let's go. Duque took the lead and rushed into a cave in the southwest corner. I'm not going the wrong way, am I? Why don't I lead the way? I think we should trust our instincts. Magni bragged. Hee hee. Duke looked at the dwarf king with a pair of loving eyes. Jaina giggled. Do you think Duque did nothing these days? His magic net has already covered half of the Kiraj shrine. Sun King Anastrian, who was walking at the back of the team, was shocked. Of course he knew what the magic net was, and he couldn't help but wonder, Thun just let Duque's power seep into his territory like that? Whoosh! 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 In the dark cave, flames lit up in an orderly fashion. They were clusters of fire elements floating in the air. They weren't attached to the walls, and they had nothing to do with the original structure of the cave. In the next moment, everyone suddenly realized that they could see through things. They realized that they could see beyond the cave walls. It wasn't true X-ray vision. Instead, there was a strong elemental light shining behind the walls of the cave. The light even passed through the walls, and the heroes could see it with their naked eyes. This is an elemental passage? Sun King was shocked. He had imagined countless times how big the gap between him and Dooku was. Now he saw it. The gap was so big that it made him despair. Duque's indescribably surging magic had already invaded every corner of this space. There was a clear elemental passageway at almost every fist-sized distance in the entire passageway. There was no need to specially connect to the elemental plane. With just a thought, he could draw out all kinds of elements from the surrounding passages for his own use. As long as he signed a contract to enter the magic net, Anastrian shuddered. The amount of magic, the purity of the elements, and the creative and revolutionary way of using them. Compared to this, every magic theory he had learned for thousands of years was simply a long and smelly foot-binding cloth. He deserved to be thrown into the trash heap of history. This wasn't just an increase in magic. At the same time, the network formed by these elemental passages was also a huge alarm system. There was no need for Duque to remind them. Everyone had already seen a tentacle as thick as a bucket breaking through the rock formation on the right side of the passage, trying to sneak in and attack. It drilled, and just as it was about to drill through the wall, it actually stopped there, waiting for its prey to take the bait. If not for the magic net's alarm, this would be the time to test their reaction. Unfortunately, Gavinrad snickered shamelessly. Then, he carried the wind sword and pretended not to see, walking towards the tentacle. In front of him was Magni, who was also pretending not to know. Behind him was Queen Sylvanas, who already had an arrow on her bow. Bam! The huge tentacle suddenly attacked. It burst out of the wall, and immediately opened its purple eyes, preparing to give Gavinrad a mental lash. Unfortunately, if this sneak attack succeeded, then the Alliance of Heroes would not live up to its name. Before the eyeball tentacle's eyelids could fully open, the wind sword with the light of lightning slashed down. On the flank, the enlarged Inferno hammer was like an erupting volcano, about to erupt at the next moment. Queen Sylvanas' arrow was the fastest, and it arrived first even though it had been fired later. The eyeball tentacle's eyelids were only half opened when it was shot, and it twitched. The twitching was extremely short, but that was enough. The Inferno hammer and wind sword fell at the same time, directly destroying the entire tentacle. Not only that, with the power of the magic net, the fire and lightning elements instantly backfired, spreading towards the depths of the ground in the direction that the tentacle had extended from. Hiss! An indescribable groan seemed to come from the depths of the ground. Facing the huge hole that the tentacle had made, Gavinrad made an arrogant gesture of cutting his throat. See, Thun. Your Lord Gavinrad is here. Wash yourself and prepare to be made into squid tentacles. Pfft! Duque spurted out. Gavinrad was really a fox using the tiger's might to intimidate others. Speaking of which, making squid tentacles from something that would affect the appearance of the city, would anyone eat it? Chapter 1337. As Duque and his team of heroes stormed through the underground tunnels of the Temple of An-Kiraj, the floating fortress, Naxxramas, was still on a level 1 combat alert. Plop plop plop, in the stronghold's enemy-seeking department, the sentries immediately heard this strange sound. The long-eared elf girl was slightly stunned. This was definitely not the sound of the ocean. The nearest lake or ocean was thousands of miles away. She subconsciously adjusted the magic mirror to find the source of the sound. Soon, she saw an unexpected scene. It was as if the scene was happening in front of her. A strange black ripple spread out in the morning light, which was incompatible with the golden light of the rising sun. 3,000 yards to the northeast, enemy attack. The elf girl's sharp shout seemed to have awakened the entire fortress. Bulang Bronzebeard, who was in charge of the fortress, was the first to react. He immediately shouted into the microphone used for magic transmission, Bao Yen, retreat immediately. Bao Yen, the newest flying battleship of the Alliance. Thanks to the assembly line-like production model, the flying battleships of the Iron Furnace Castle were now produced at an average rate of 1 every 3 months. The dwarves and gnome craftsmen of the Iron Furnace Castle worked day and night in 3 shifts. The 3 docks were built on top of the mountains. They were built with steel directly smelted from the Iron Stove Castle's smelting furnace and the toughest 100-year-old trees in Loch Moden as the deck. The deck was covered with steel sheets and equipped with standard cannons. Each dock could produce a battleship in 9 months. Unlike the meticulously built Heavenbreaker and Black Pearl battleships, the Alliance also needed a large number of medium and light battleships as protection ships according to the needs of the war. The cruiser, whose full name was the Cleveland class, or the Kappa class for short, was a product of this requirement, which focused on enhancing anti-air firepower. No one knew why the founder of the Alliance's mechanized air force, Duque, insisted on using this name, and even looked like he would roll on the ground if he didn't agree. In any case, who could argue with Duque on this kind of thing? On average, the 6 medium-sized shipyards had 2 Cadet-class cruisers flying out of the shipyards every month. No one would have thought that after Duque and his elites broke into the Kiraj Shrine, the first ship to be tested would be this new cruiser. It was as if a giant water droplet had dripped into a lake that was as calm as a mirror. Starting from a single point, it expanded in all directions and rapidly spread to the side of Bao Yen. This cruiser had 2 huge propellers as its power source, so of course it wasn't propelled by backward steam. Steam did not have enough power to carry this light cruiser, that weighed over 10,000 tons. Using the power core of the latest sharp elemental furnace, it could generate 100,000 horsepower. But for a 10,000-ton ship, 100,000 horsepower was still not enough to generate enough instantaneous kinetic energy to get it out of this misfortune. In the main control room of the stronghold, Bulang's face was ashen as he watched this almost static scene. The moment he saw this huge spatial fluctuation, he smelled the kind of power that had once appeared on Si Thun's body, but it was more majestic and more difficult to match. It was a terrifying power that stood above the mortal world and coexisted with the planets, the power of God. The captain of Bao Yen, Favaro Violent Fist, was the most senior steam tank commander. Almost at the same time that the stronghold sounded the alarm, he opened a magic shield. However, when a huge tentacle that was 100 meters long appeared from the spatial ripples and swept towards Bao Yen, all evasion and resistance were rendered useless. Wherever the tentacle went, the elemental lines of law disintegrated one after another. Bulang could only watch helplessly as his old subordinate's ship was easily crushed into pieces like a dog whose neck and bones had been twisted by a python. Time seemed to slow down, and every piece of debris was spinning in the air. The barrel of a gun, polished to a shine. Half of the deck that still seemed to smell the fresh paint. A short and fat human figure that was wailing and still waving its hands and feet, but was quickly falling. When everything came into view, Bulang found that his heart was deeply pierced. The northeast corner of Naxxramas suddenly lit up. It was the light of wind and thunder. Aurelia and Sasha, who had been left behind for some reason, drew their bows and knocked arrows on a platform. The atmosphere was surging, and large masses of dark clouds instantly gathered in the sky above them. Half a second later, lightning flashed and thunder roared, and the sound of thunder rumbled through the entire northeast corner of the stronghold. Soon, the charge was completed. With the support of the wind and thunder, 2 bolts of lightning formed a spiral in the air and fiercely crossed the void of 3,000 meters. They hit the huge tentacle that was wreaking havoc. However, it was useless. Admittedly, the joint attack of the Windrunner sisters had caused terrible damage to the tentacle. The hole that was big enough for a carriage to pass through looked really shocking. But in less than 5 seconds, after a violent squirming, everyone in the stronghold and the surrounding flying warships who were watching this scene found that the terrible tentacle had actually begun to heal on its own. Varrock muttered, his arm holding the axe trembling a little. As expected of an ancient god. At this moment, time seemed to stop around them. Be it the hourglasses used to calculate time or the ancient mechanical clocks, they all stopped working. This is. The Windrunner sisters' eyes widened. With the best eyesight, they saw that the floating sand in the sky had begun to gather in a strange way. A power that they had truly seen before, evoking a distant memory in their hearts. That was in Lordaeron, when King Terenas was still alive. A giant dragon claw made of sand and stone appeared out of thin air and grabbed the lively tentacle. Everyone who witnessed this scene was filled with shock. The power of a true god could only be easily suppressed by the existence of the realm of gods. Almost without giving the onlookers time to think, there was a loud bang, and the giant tentacle quickly withered, turning into large pieces of broken rocks, falling from thousands of meters in the sky. The huge rocks fell on the soft surface of the desert. The impact of the hundreds of tons of debris and the acceleration of gravity directly made a loud roar like a cannon. There was no cannon fire, but it sounded like Naxxramas had set off a storm of cannons again. In mid-air, the giant dragon claw continued to tearing large sections of tentacles out of the void. This time, it seemed that there was no time to petrify. The broken tentacle made a sound like tearing cloth, and then black blood gushed out. Then there was an inhuman scream, echoing over the entire Silithus. Chapter 1338. Naturally, Duque was aware of the earth-shattering battle outside. Taking advantage of the time when Thun was withdrawing his forces, Duque attacked while the enemy retreated. His magic net, which had almost nibbled away at the deepest part of the enemy's nest, could ensure that magic messages were unobstructed to the greatest extent. The hero group was still advancing. Although they lined up in a more reasonable oval-shaped formation, the tentacles were everywhere. After discovering that they could be sensed, Thun's tentacles chose to attack at a faster and fiercer speed. They used speed to attack. With so many tentacles attacking at the same time, everyone's skills could be seen at a glance. Almost everyone had been attacked. As they advanced in the underground cave while fighting, Sal felt that there was a problem. It was just like how the Horde lacked warriors and had to recruit the Forgotten Ones to supplement Orgrim and the other undead warrior heroes. Because of the disappearance of Ronan and Turalian, the Alliance had to supplement a group of second-line powerhouses. But second-line my ass. Where did these guys come from? A red-haired female elf with an impressive bust, who almost bursts in Doriai's red military uniform, walked proudly next to Queen Sylvanas. This female elf who called herself Legolas claimed to be a warrior and was also holding Escdal's claw, which was classified as a glove. This thing came from the Molten Core Magmadar's spoils of war. It was a set with both the left and right claws. At first, she didn't say a word, but her aura was already very frightening. That was the aura of someone who had been in a high position for a long time. Without sufficient strength and confidence, it was impossible to have such an aura. She walked next to Sylvanas. It was hard to tell whether she was the queen or Sylvanas was the queen. At first, Sal only thought that this guy's aura was a bit fierce. What happened next scared him so much that his eyeballs almost popped out. A huge Thun tentacle broke through the rock wall and stabbed directly at her and Queen Sylvanas. Normally, Queen Sylvanas' arrow would arrive first, but who knew that Legolas' movement was even faster? The claw of that mediocre Escdal swung over, and the bystanders only felt a sudden gust of wind. In the blink of an eye, all he saw was a bloody, limp tentacle. In less than half a second, the tentacle bounced up high and fell heavily again, emitting a burning smell and the sound of a leaking ball lying on the ground softly. A tentacle that could smash a steam tank or even a destroyer into smithereens lay motionless on the ground like a rotten sausage. What was even more ridiculous was that this woman actually broke a molten core level glove. The originally sharp claws were missing a large piece, revealing the white and tender fingers. What the hell was this? The woman's finger was fine, but the molten core level glove had exploded? Could it be that the gloves couldn't keep up with her strength? Sal was going crazy. The same thing happened to the other three. An eyeball tentacle burst out, attempting to attack a mage called Dogsh*T.O. Goss. In the end, this guy didn't use the magic net, nor did he connect to the elemental plane. He didn't even use an incantation. A white sea urchin that seemed to be made of pure ice flashed by, and in the next moment, that terrifying tentacle suddenly burst like a water pipe. Countless amounts of blood gushed out from the cracks of various sizes, converging into a stream of blood beside it. This tentacle that had caused damage to many heroes since the start of the war had reached the end of its life in an instant. There was also a high elf named Dom, a warrior with a long black braid. He didn't even have any equipment, and he directly hammered a sharp, curved tentacle with his fist like a drum. That tentacle seemed to have been ruthlessly smashed by a heavy industrial mechanical arm that could lift a 1,000-ton ship, and immediately went limp. Since when did the elves produce so many strong people? Thrall looked at Orgrim first. This former chief, who was already a death knight, shrugged his shoulders. His expression was clearly saying, if these fellows had been around during World War II at the Dark Portal, why would I fight Kuel Salus? Originally, Sal thought that the person next to him understood the situation the best. Who would have thought that Sun King was trying hard to keep a straight face while looking at Goss with frightened eyes? Damn! To be able to scare the Breaking Dawn level Sun King like this, there was no need to ask, this person must have a terrifying background. At this time, Wujin gently poked Sal's waist with his elbow. Following Wujin's gaze, Sal saw a strange aura on the Alliance's side. Because Malfurion Stormrage had fallen into a deep sleep, Fandral Staghelm was the boss of the Cenarian Circle again. Logically speaking, there should be no Night Elf Druid that he didn't know. But there was one in front of him. The female Druid who claimed to be Sala had a typical Night Elf green waterfall hair. Except for her pair of eyes that never opened, no matter how you looked at it, she was a typical Night Elf. Her heal, rejuvenate, and wild growth were so smooth that even Fandral, who claimed to be the #1 druid, could not compare. It had been so long since she showed off her skills, and Fandral had been pestering her for so long. Where are you from? A solitary practitioner? Are you interested in joining the Cenarian Circle? The way of druids needs a master like you. His interest in Sala was not fake. He expressed deep disgust for Tyron's excessive approach to the Alliance. Although Malfurion had fallen into a deep sleep and was no longer in power, he could not murder Malfurion. Within the Night Elves, he continued to rope in stronger masters to increase his faction's influence. Who knew that Sala would ignore him, and when she was asked anxiously, she asked him to go ask Duque. Fandral was depressed to death. Unfortunately, he was in a state of battle, and he did not dare to bother her too much. Otherwise, Duque would slap him and say that he was absent-minded. That bitch Tyrant would not protect him. At the same time, on the void battlefield, Krasus was sitting on pins and needles, because he was sitting on the throne of the one he respected the most. Not far away from him was an illusion of a gigantic blue dragon coiled in the air. At a glance, there was indeed an incomparably huge blue dragon entrenched there. If anyone could see through the thick elemental turbulence that enveloped the blue dragon, they would clearly see that there was no such huge blue dragon in that position. There was only a frost elemental dragon with a bitter smile on its face. Krasus was displeased. Sapphiron, if you expose me, I will not forgive you. Sapphiron rolled its eyes. You're blaming me? Beside Krasus, a figure in a cloak smiled bitterly. It's fine. This plan should be perfect. Even if something happens, we will prioritize protecting the void battlefield. That's for the best. Chapter 1339. Even further away from Azeroth, an interstellar battleship was quietly lurking in the asteroid zone. This was the extreme position to monitor planet Azeroth. What's up with the 4 lizards? Same old. The red and blue auras are still exaggerated. The bronze and green auras are hidden. These 4 lizards are really calm. Their home is about to be destroyed. Should we add another wave of attacks? Bullsh *T. Whoever wants to go can go. Without receiving Lord Kill Jaden's order, I won't let my brothers go for nothing. The words of these 2 Void Lords also represented the thoughts of many lords of the Burning Legion. That's right, as long as they died outside the twisting void, they could theoretically revive infinitely. This was on the premise that their souls could run back. For demons with almost infinite lifespans, there was the great achievement of the guy whose name was Taboo blowing up the twisting void fortress 10,000 years ago. There was also Mount Hyjal in Azeroth, where Archimonde died. Not only were they afraid of death, but they were also afraid of reviving. This was because reviving would inevitably cause damage to the soul. It was fine once or twice, but if they revived too many times, the damage to the soul would naturally be severe, which would bring about a decline in strength. This was often how Void Lords were replaced. Now, other than the most belligerent Abyss Lords and Doom Guards, many Demon Lords were a little hesitant. No one would have thought that Duque had actually calculated the frequency of the Burning Legion's attacks and played a trick right under their noses. Whether it was Krasus or Sapphiron, as the capable subordinates of their boss, their auras were of the same origin. What Duque needed to do was to increase the elemental waves that they emitted. Alexstrasza was a nature element, and Maligos was mainly a frost element. After connecting to the magic net, they were about the same when observed from afar. Duque gambled that the Burning Legion spies could not go deep into the void fortress that the Titans had left for the dragons, and could only observe from afar. If he could not deceive the Burning Legion, Duque would fulfill his promise and immediately send the 4 back to the void battlefield. This was why the 4 Dragon Kings had the time to come to the underground cave to be thugs. In order not to scare Thun, Duque also asked them to suppress their strength and enter in human form. Alright, before giving Thun a surprise, I'll surprise my own people first. As they went deeper into the cave, everyone could clearly feel that the evil aura was increasing endlessly. A large number of tentacles drilled everywhere. Everyone could vaguely sense that the tentacles seemed to feel the pulse of the earth while injecting venom-like substances into every corner of the earth, even deep into the planet Azeroth. When the venom decayed everything, it would suck it back and use it as nutrients for its growth. He suddenly understood why Titan had beaten up the 4 great ancient gods back then and sealed them. If the Cursed Land's Gate of Darkness was the most straightforward form of absorption, causing everything to wither and all life to be extinguished, then the Cursed Land's Gate of Darkness was the most straightforward form of absorption. Then what Thun did was the darkest corruption and the most brutal plunder. Speed up. Under Duque's command, everyone suddenly found that the tentacles no longer drilled into the ground, sides, and ceiling of the passage. This was because all the tentacles had been directly mobilized by Duque to form magic and directly attacked from outside the walls. In the absence of interference, everyone could directly use the crystal to summon the insect mounts. 4-legged insects, fast and stable, it would be strange if they could. For N-shaped legs full of spikes, any girl would have goosebumps at the sight of it. However, in the desert area, there was no mount faster than this thing. These insects the size of small cars were summoned, and whether they were willing or forced, they could only obediently follow the orders of the crystal that contained their emperor's will and bitterly move towards the more dangerous depths at high speed. From the outside, Thun's nest was a huge ring-shaped building. Next to the not-so-exaggerated gate, Duque gave one last reminder: remember, the key is to disperse the formation. As long as we stand together, we will be infinitely connected by the rays of the eyeballs, and then we will all be wiped out. F***ck. Duque couldn't help but curse, dog, sh**t, that's right. The self-centered Maligos, who was pretending to be the best in the world, actually didn't listen to Duque and rushed in first. As the ancestor of Azeroth magic, Malygos boasted of being the king of magic. Needless to say, he didn't have a good attitude towards Duque. Even though Duque had deliberately avoided using his name when he advanced to become a demigod, and the range of the weave's usage avoided the dragons and fixed it on mortal races like humans, night elves, blood elves, and dwarves, it still didn't stop Malygos from being unhappy with Duque. Malygos' authority in magic had always been limited to the blue dragon race. This old man felt that everyone in the world who played magic had to listen to him. Perhaps in his heart, Duque was still the little morning star wizard he had met all those years ago, needing to kneel down and worship him. He could ignore all of Duque's achievements and all of Duque's efforts to protect this world. If you're so awesome, then fight Xiaofan alone if you can. Duque scolded. He really scolded out loud. He had spent so much effort to use the time difference to pull 6 demigods to surround Xiaofan. Did he think it was easy? The experts of the Alliance tribe were dumbfounded. The 3 dragon kings were flustered and exasperated. Wait! Are you crazy? Alexstrasza, who had changed her name to Legolas, almost wanted to slap Malygos and drag him back. Humph! Malygos snorted coldly, completely ignoring the Red Dragon Queen. At this moment, Xiaofan, who was in the middle of the huge circular hall in the darkness, slowly revealed its disgusting appearance. At first glance, it looked a bit like an incense burner. Its fat, brown body was full of thorn-like barbs. It was covered with dark purple eyes and yellow-black pupils that people with trypophobia most did not want to see. On the body with the base of the incense burner, there were more than 10 hooks that curved towards the sky. In the middle, there was an even larger eyeball. This huge eyeball with a diameter of at least 7 stories slowly opened after sensing the arrival of Malygos in human form. It was hard to tell whether it was ridicule or sarcasm. Xiaofan's voice directly crossed the void and turned into mental power that entered the minds of every challenger. However, the voice was clearly directed at Malygos. It was not like a declaration. It was more like a hint or even a curse. Malygos. Death is not far from you. You will die. You will betray your siblings. You will be abandoned by your siblings. You are too weak. Duque's heart skipped a beat. Chapter 1340. He didn't know if the words brother, sister, and friend in the Draconic language were synonymous, or if that was the original meaning. Xiaofan's words were like a powerful mental suggestion, but the one who was most affected was Duque, the transmigrator. Duque clearly remembered what happened to Malygos later. In the game version of Wrath of the Lich King, Malygos believed that the world had been corrupted by creatures that used magic indiscriminately. He decided to destroy all creatures that used magic and even magic-related creatures. Obviously, Duque was now on the top blacklist of creatures that used magic indiscriminately. If this went on, there was no need for original history or so-called prophecies. Just inference alone was enough to know that Duque and Malygos would fight. Although Duque didn't like Malygos, he really didn't want Malygos to die. The death of one more dragon aspect would weaken planet Azeroth's protective array by 20%. Even if a new dragon aspect was chosen, it would be impossible to fill the original gap. This was like changing to a small caliber screw. It could be inserted, but it definitely wouldn't fit. In the original history, the later dragon aspects became weaker and weaker. This was an indisputable fact. It wasn't until Nozdormu and his future darkened self perished together that the planet Azeroth's protective array was finally broken. Only then did the Burning Legion fully invade. Duque felt a headache coming on. However, he didn't have the time to care about things that happened so long ago. According to history, it would be many years before Malygos's brain went crazy. Theoretically, Xiaofan wasn't Enzos, who was good at hypnosis and brainwashing. It should be fine, should be, on the other side, Malygos was furious. No more dragon aspects will betray their brothers and sisters, traitors will be nailed to the pillar of shame forever. Xiaofan. Don't think that just because you're a true god you have the right to sow discord between me and my brothers and sisters. The only thing worthy of you is a deeper destruction. In response to his angry roar, Malygos transformed. A pair of beautiful blue wings shot out from his back, and his limbs instantly turned into ferocious, sharp claws. Ice blue, fine, and solid scales covered them. The expensive epic-ranked mage robe was instantly frozen and shattered into pieces of ice, revealing the body of a giant dragon with a tail growing out of its butt. In the blink of an eye, the arrogant mage had completely taken on the form of a dragon. Although his size seemed to be comparable to Xiaofan's, anyone could feel that their auras were not on the same level. Even so, it was enough to astonish all the experts of the tribe. Everything was explained. No wonder Duque did not immediately take advantage of Xiaofan's incomplete recovery after defeating the twin emperors and directly lead the alliance's powerhouses to march. It was no wonder that after the horde killed Adrian the Scarless, they did not immediately gather the horde to attack. Instead, they were considerate enough to give them a full 3 days of precious rest time. It turned out that everything was just in passing. Duque had been waiting for the 4 dragon aspects from the beginning to the end. Malygos transformed, and the other 3 dragon aspects also transformed at the same time. 3 long, distant roars seemed to come from the War of the Masters 25,000 years ago. The battle where the titans of the pantheon beat up the ancient gods was replayed today. Although the leader was no longer Sargeras, the titan warrior, and he was not fighting against a group of powerful elemental lords like Ragnaros or several ancient gods who were in perfect condition, the 4 dragon kings appeared together to besiege the half-crippled Xiaofan. This scene, which should have only existed in epics and legends, was happening in front of a crowd of mortals. It was hard to tell if it was excitement, ecstasy, or some other emotion. Strong emotional fluctuations, accompanied by the fierce vibrations of the surrounding elements, were transmitted to the depths of every mortal's heart. Everyone's hearts expanded and contracted greatly because of the excessive stimulation. Blood was strongly pumped from the heart, rushing to every corner of the body. The eyes of the weak gradually turned pitch black, and they greedily inhaled the slightly turbid air. The vision of the strong was filled with brilliance. They saw the agitation of the elements and the exaggerated confrontation. More importantly, they saw the boundary between mortals and gods. The absolute boundary that once felt unreachable did not seem so difficult to break through. As soon as the 4 dragons went up, the surrounding elements were instantly sucked dry. Malygos directly summoned an ice dragon made of pure frost elements. It pounced over with its fangs and claws bared, and it bit down. The elemental dragon succeeded, but it also failed. Its bloody mouth bit off a large piece of Xiaofan's flesh, and only a large gap could be seen in the lower body of the incense burner. But before Malygos could be happy for half a second, the entire elemental dragon was stabbed by a large tentacle that rose from the ground into the sky. The sky was filled with icicles, and even Xiaofan's body was not frozen much. Xiaofan's lower body, which was brown with a little pink, began to squirm disgustingly. In everyone's vision, Xiaofan's entire body had grown larger, except for the large eyeball above. It was proliferating. Roar! Nozdormu used sand to form a dragon's body and fiercely swung Xiaofan's tail. But halfway through, the tail was also blocked by a large tentacle that appeared out of thin air. Its tail was broken, and the sand that exploded had a great deal to do with time. This was because all the parts of Xiaofan that were hit by the tail fragments began to wither. Alexstrasza was the most direct. She fiercely spat out dragon's breath as soon as she went up. However, her dragon's breath was immediately offset by a red blazing light that was as thick as a house that shot out from Xiaofan's bulging eyeball. The fierce battle between the Red Dragon Queen and the ancient god caused the most terrifying law shock. It was reasonable to say that this terrifying collision of power was enough to easily destroy a fortress and cause several blocks to collapse in the destructive shock wave. However, everyone only felt a moment of trance. The master of the Emerald Dream, the Green Dragon Queen Isra, made her move. With the strange and gentle sound of the wind, a green light spread further with the wind. The majestic walls of the underground palace of the Temple of An-Kiraj silently turned into powder and sank into the hard stone ground under their feet. The battlefield that appeared in front of the mortals was a huge hemispherical hole with a radius of at least a kilometer. Is this the Emerald Dream? Tyron showed a look of admiration. No. Isra's voice sounded in the minds of the mortals. No matter how arrogant I am, I would not dare to pull an evil ancient god into the Emerald Dream. I just used my natural power to forcibly change the surrounding landscape to make this place more suitable for dragons and mortals to fight. Chapter 1341. The power of a demigod was enough to move mountains and fill seas. The ground that had just been flattened, with a crash, the solid granite stones stacked up layer by layer like broken waves. The ground was covered with shocking cracks, as if it had experienced a terrible earthquake. At this time, the heroes were a little hesitant. Duque shouted, "What are you waiting for? Enter according to the prearranged formation." Others might not know, but Duque knew best. The ancient god Xiaofan was disgusting not because of his powerful single-target attacks, but because of the endless situation. On the surface, the four dragon kings attacked together, and the mortals felt like they were just bystanders, but in reality, they were not. Xiaofan was a terrifying existence that could destroy the world by himself. Not only did his tentacles affect the city, but they also greatly interfered with the movements of the four dragon kings. Whoosh! There was a loud noise, and a giant claw tentacle appeared. The size of this enormous tentacle was no different from that of a 5-story tower. In front of this level of tentacle, the scales and dragon skin that the dragon kings were so proud of were no different from the armor of mortals. As long as it was hit, it would definitely be pierced and torn apart. A tentacle easily penetrated Nozdormu's thigh, and the dragon leg that weighed several tons suddenly exploded. If Nozdormu was a giant dragon with flesh and blood, he would probably have been seriously injured. Roar! The Time Dragon King roared angrily, and his thick tail swept over violently. However, the tail that weighed hundreds of tons did not break the tentacle. Instead, after a few trembles, the giant claw tentacle drilled back into the ground. When had the Bronze Dragon King ever suffered such a big loss? He wanted to drill into the ground and settle the score with that tentacle. Nozdormu! Alexstrasza stopped him. Nozdormu could only resentfully restore his dragon leg. It was true that he was a giant dragon made of sand, but it took time and energy to rebuild his body. It was obvious that the attacks of the four dragon kings had slowed down. The next moment, the tentacle that had just caused trouble came out again. This time, it changed its target to Isra, who had not used close combat. Although Isra had the least offensive moves among the four dragon kings, and did not dare to use the power of dreams to attack Xiaofan, her existence was the key. Because Xiaofan's attack was mainly a wide-area nature attack, Isra's nature resistance aura could effectively reduce more than 80% of the damage. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Isra's existence was the key. Just as Isra, who was casting a healing spell, discovered that the giant claw had suddenly popped out from the right side of her dragon abdomen, a large, silver-colored dwarf rushed over and viciously struck the tip of the giant claw with a whirlwind hammer. It could not be said to be a tit-for-tat, as the Shorty King had used the avatar descending to increase his size by at least 5 times, but the Fire Lord hammer had increased by 10 times. When the god equipment giant hammer, which was constructed from pure fire elements, turned from an elemental form into a solid form, and was then swung around by Magni's inhumanly terrifying strength with a hint of gold within the black hammer before smashing it down viciously. The visual stimulation that was filled with shock left every single mortal speechless. Bang! An earth-shattering explosion was accompanied by a flaming shockwave that splattered in all directions. Even though the size and the scene were completely different, the people present felt as if they were watching a child playing with a hammer to hit a gopher. With one strike of the hammer, a giant claw tentacle that should have been taken down by a dozen people had actually been charred black. Queen Sylvanas merely added an arrow, and the giant tentacle was finished. It was like a leaking balloon, slanted and flattened on the ground. Without giving anyone the time to catch their breath, Xiaofan in this life was obviously more violent. Squeak! There was a strange sound, and everyone felt the ground shake violently. This guy wants to pull us underground. Nozdormu was shocked and angry, and had no choice but to attack angrily. No one knew what exactly happened. They only saw that the ground that was originally starting to collapse seemed to have been rewound, and the cracked areas were perfectly repaired. In any case, another Dragon King was being held back. As Alexstrasza dug out a large piece of Xiaofan's body with a slap, she shouted at Duque, "Help us clean up those troublesome things." In addition to the giant claw tentacles, there were also tentacles with huge eyeballs. These things called the giant eye tentacles were also deadly weapons. If the team was too crowded, the mind whip shot out from the eyeballs would be like a chain of lightning, bouncing and spreading almost infinitely throughout the team. The only way to deal with these things was to use powerful long-range attacks. Ha! The Empress Dowager waved Ashbringer, and the brilliant golden light turned into a crescent moon. It swept across the battlefield and cut the eyeball tentacle in half at the root. This was not the end. The hideous eyeballs were still twitching violently on the ground, randomly pouring out deadly rays in all directions. Humph! The masters snorted in all directions at the same time. Queen Sylvanas' arrow. Gianna's ice. Sun King's fire. Woking's spear. The four attacks almost hit the giant eye tentacle at the same time, blowing it up in one breath. At the same time, Duque's performance was a little quiet. He did not look like a demigod at all. In the eyes of others, his performance was similar to that of other mortals. At most, he would play backstab, suddenly flash behind a giant eye tentacle, and give it a hard blow with the spiral sword. Similarly, Onyxia, who had transformed into Countess Katrana, also behaved like a peak radiant moon archmage, extremely low-key. What was Duque doing? Only the dragons knew. In the void, the Burning Legion suddenly received a secret report. Your source said that the four big lizards actually abandoned the void battlefield and ran to deal with the rioting ancient god Xiaofan. The Void Lord Ambassador Helmer, who used to be a dread guard, muttered. Auras walked out of the shadows and said, "There is an 80% chance that the information is accurate. The Sleeping Dragon Temple has a close relationship with the leader of the Alliance, Duke Marcus. If it wasn't for us dragging the Sleeping Dragon Temple's power in the void, those big lizards would have already arrived at the Silithus battlefield." Queen Saloras said, "This is an opportunity. If we can break through the Sleeping Dragon Temple's defense line, it will definitely be a great achievement." Ambassador Helmer's face turned cold. "It's me, not we." He did not give the twins a good look. Ever since the twins made a mistake 10,000 years ago, their status was not as good as before. Now, in the eyes of other lords, they were just running errands and playing tricks. They could not represent Commander Kill Jaden. "Yes, it's you, the great Ambassador Helmer." The twins tactfully lowered their heads. Chapter 1342. Ambassador Helmer looked up slowly. "I did not receive Lord Kill Jaden's order to attack, so it's up to me whether or not to believe the so-called accurate intelligence. Yes, that's right. The Gemini lowered her head even more. Their plan was indeed very well thought out. If Helmer was successfully incited and foolishly went to attack, it would be a success. Of course, it would be due to their accurate intelligence. If they failed, it would be Helmer who sent out the troops without permission. The demons of the Burning Legion could run as many corpses as they wanted. To be honest, no matter how many died, the leader of the demon army would not mind. The point was, to send in the demons, they had to sacrifice the void warships. The demons were unlimited, but the warships were limited. It was not a lack of resources. After all, Chief Sa had taken almost all the warships of the Pantheon. It was a pity that he did not get the production line for the void warships. So while there were many warships, one destroyed meant one less. Helmer was not a simple-minded abyssal lord. Jaden had painstakingly arranged for Helmer to lead the harassment war against Azeroth because he valued his intelligence. As a Dread Guardian, he had the appearance of an Apocalypse Guard, except that his entire body was dark green, and he had 2 huge bat wings. Because of the infusion of dark energy, he seemed to have a cold aura. He suddenly threw out a poisonous bait. Since you believe in this intelligence, then you can borrow some void warships from me, and the demon army can also take some. In exchange, you must give me sufficient collateral. The Eridar Gemini was first overjoyed, then shocked. Telepathically connected, they looked at each other and quickly made a decision: go for it. They had lost Jaden's trust for a long time. In the Burning Legion, where power struggles were so severe, it was already a miracle that they could survive until now. Countless male lords wanted to take them back as playthings or slaves, and countless female demons wanted to step on their corpses to rise, such as Mother Sharas of the Sylvanas. They had absolutely accurate intelligence that confirmed that the 4 Dragon Kings were now fighting Thun in the depths of the Kiraj Temple. So they decisively bet a large number of soul stones. Those were high-quality souls they had collected from different planets and worlds over the past 10,000 years. While they did not bet everything, it was definitely 70 to 80% of their savings. They had no choice but to bet. In terms of strength, they were far superior to Helmer, but they did not have the power. This was the difference. Looking at the Eridar Gemini's collateral, Ambassador Helmer smiled. With so much, even if Jaden were to question him, he would be able to answer to him. You can take away 2 void battleships, 10 void cruisers, 30 destroyers, and the corresponding demon army. The time limit is 10 Azeroth days. If the damage exceeds 50%, the authorization will be automatically revoked. Just as she was about to speak, she was stopped by Queen Salola's. That's right, the collateral they provided was more than enough to borrow twice their strength. But the military power was in Helmer's hands. The Eridar twins suddenly closed their eyes at the same time. Only the 2 of them could see the intense battle that was happening at the same time in another dimension. Alexstrasza bravely charged in front, tearing off pieces of Thun's flesh. Maligos used his comprehensive and violent magic to suppress Thun's regeneration. Nozdormu ruthlessly caused Thun's overgrown cells to age and die prematurely. Isra used a powerful natural aura to defend against Thun's attacks. This scene, this undeceiving elemental and divine power undulations were all clearly transmitted to the Gemini's senses through a certain observing eye. No problem. So be it. The Gemini quickly made a decision. Speed was the most important thing in war. Half an hour later, a small Burning Legion fleet with a long tail of green flames was teleported from the distant side of the galaxy to the void battlefield outside of Azeroth's atmosphere in one go. Don't be afraid. The dragon slumber temples for dragon aspects are not here. The ones left here are just some ancient dragons. Ancient dragons could basically fight to a draw with a Void Lord at the beginning stage. The Eridar Gemini were called intermediate, but they were demoted due to their defeat in the distorted void 10,000 years ago. In terms of strength, the two sisters were among the top in the Burning Legion. As long as the 4 Dragon Kings were not around, no dragon was a match for the two sisters. The invasion of the evil demons naturally triggered the alarm of the Void Fortress left behind by the Titans to guard Azeroth. Almost at the same time, the figures of the 4 dragon aspects paused for a moment. They really came. Alexstrasza was not angry, but smiled instead. What's wrong? Sar, who was busy beating up the eyeball tentacles, suddenly turned his head. Nothing much. There really are evil demons that came to attack the void battlefield, Isra replied calmly. Then what should they do? Were the dragon aspects going to give up on this battlefield and run back immediately? Be it the Alliance or the Horde, every powerhouse knew the duty of the dragon aspects. They had always been the top priority when it came to defending against the Burning Legion. You guys. Just as Magni was about to ask. A shocking change occurred. Duque, who had been doing nothing all this while, flashed and ran behind a forgotten archmage, stabbing him with his sword without saying a word. The golden sword that looked like a spiral nail easily pierced through the chest of the former Silver Moon Council member. The surging divine power caused indescribable pain to the Great Lich's soul. The bystanders only saw that the Great Lich was in so much pain that his entire body almost arched backwards. The upper and lower parts of his dry lips were cracked to the maximum, revealing teeth that were slightly black. Duke Marcus. What are you doing? The most furious one was naturally the Sun King. He suddenly turned his golden staff and aimed it at Duque. Not just Sar and the other Horde powerhouses, even the heroes of the Alliance were stunned. What was Duque doing? Was he going to break off relations with the Horde and kill them all in one go? Was he going to challenge the true god Seat Thun? Shock, disbelief, suspicion, fear, and all kinds of emotions intertwined among the mortals. In the next instant, everyone understood the answer. An eyeball suddenly popped out of the eye socket of the Great Lich who had been stabbed in the back. It was not an ordinary eyeball that the Lich had preserved using shadow magic. It was an observer's eye that belonged to the Burning Legion. In less than half a second after the eyeball popped out, it had already expanded to the size of a fist. The purple veins and whiskers around the eyeball also proved this fact. Holy light above, we're being watched. Benedettas exclaimed. Chapter 1343. That's right, all the scenes of the battle just now had obviously been transmitted to the Burning Legion through the traitor's specially replaced eyeball. Sal felt a wave of anger and humiliation. He had gone against the majority's opinion and forcibly brought the Forsaken into the tribe. He had valued the combat power of the Forsaken, but ultimately, it was because of the situation. He knew very well that the tribe's greatest enemy was not the Alliance. The greatest enemies ranked above the Alliance were Seat Thun, the damned ancient god, and the Burning Legion. He would never forget what the Burning Legion had done on the Kalimdor continent. Half of Grey Valley, the entire Fellwood Forest, had been destroyed by the Burning Legion. Even with the restrictions of high-ranking commanders, there were still demons who ran away or hid in the years after the Burning Legion invaded Kalimdor, indiscriminately killing the Night Elves and the people of the tribe. Now, there was actually a traitor in the tribe's hero team that he should have trusted the most? How could he tolerate this? Go to hell. Traitor. Sal leaped high, and the hammer of destruction burst into blazing flames. With a leap hack that was deeply inherited from Grandpa Roar, not only did the hammer smash the observer's eye that had not escaped in time, but it also smashed the Great Lich's head into a rotten watermelon. Yep, a rotten watermelon. He. Mortals, no one can resist the Legion. The Great Lich's cold laughter echoed in the void. Stay. Anastrian could not keep his face any longer and took the initiative to attack. However, he was not a true warlock. His soul-binding technique was actually resisted by the Lich. No one expected Duque to attack again. To be precise, it was the elemental emissary under Duque's command who attacked. Duque raised his hand, and the figure of the Black Witch Farina suddenly appeared beside him. She raised her hand and used a more authentic, soul capture. The Great Lich's soul screamed and struggled, trying to break free from the soul vortex formed by the crimson crystal in Farina's hand. The Black Witch chuckled coldly, "Run, run if you can. You betrayed Azeroth. Your will is useless. Now, after repenting, you will become Master's servant and serve Master loyally. The most glorious thing in this world is to serve Master's cause forever." Farina's entrance was a pain in the ass for the mortal experts. How did the backbone of the cursing sect, who was originally loyal to Kel Thuzad, suddenly become Duque's diehard fan? Not only was she fanatical, but she also came to fight for Duque. Everyone could imagine what would happen to this traitor if he fell into the hands of such an evil woman. "Sal, give me this guy's soul. You don't have any objections, do you?" Duque asked as he swatted away a tentacle. "No problem." Sal was resolute and did not even look at the Sun King. "The problem now is not the Alliance and the Horde, I'm fine." Duque waved his hand. "Everything is going according to plan," Isra replied with a smile. Was it all part of the plan? Could it be that even the traitor among the Forsaken was part of Duque's plan? Sal, Wajin, Orgrim, and the Sun King were all shocked at the same time. Someone's changed. Duque slapped Onyxia, who was immersed in her sadistic fantasies, on the shoulder and woke her up. If there were no outsiders, Duque would even kick her on her perky and elastic butt. The formation that besieged Sea Thun suddenly changed. Alexstrasza and Maligos were still attacking fiercely. Isra's figure seemed to be exiled by the magic of the warlocks, and her whole dragon body became illusory and transparent. However, everyone could still clearly feel her natural resistance halo, which was counteracting Sea Thun's natural attribute attack. The most exaggerated one was Nozdormu, whose huge sand dragon body became slow. Although it was only a little bit, everyone could feel that this guy was already a good-for-nothing. "How dare you be distracted while fighting me? Are you looking down on me?" Sea Thun let out an angry roar. "No. We didn't look down on you." With Duque's voice, Onyxia quickly became bigger. As the Black Dragon Princess, there was an absolute gap in strength between her and the 4 dragon aspects. As the closest in strength to the dragon aspects, she was qualified to succeed as the Earth Guardian. Even if she couldn't do as well as Nozdormu, it was not a problem for her to defend more and attack less. No matter how strong Sea Thun was, it was impossible for him to completely ignore the attack of a genuine demigod creature. Damn it, the whole cave echoed with Sea Thun's roar. In the void battlefield, the Eridar twins' faces turned green. Because just when they ordered the void battleship to release the demonic troops and spread out the formation, they suddenly felt a strong magic fluctuation. The magic turbulence that was surging enough to interfere with space was dominating the entire airspace. In the countless battles between the Burning Legion and the Dragon race, the demons knew that there were only 2 existences in the entire dragon race who could do this. One was the dimensional dragon king, Nozdormu. The other was, in the Void Fortress, a dazzling icy blue light shone. The light was so bright that it was comparable to the light of the sun in an instant. A beautiful and gigantic dragon was standing at the entrance of the fortress, displaying its terrifying and oppressive figure. "I, Maligos. I am the incarnation of magic," the arrogant voice was transmitted to the void battleship 10,000 meters away through the violent elemental fluctuation. That Maligos' body was bursting with a storm-like frost element. As soon as he appeared, he froze all the void trash at the entrance of the fortress. This, a low-level Void Lord of the Apocalypse Guard turned to look in the direction of the Void battleship. His questioning voice reached the Eridar twins' ears. Didn't you say that the 4 dragon aspects aren't here? The Burning Legion and the dragon race had been fighting each other for so many years and knew each other very well. Every single dragon aspect was in existence with shocking strength, and they could easily take on a high-tier Void Duke on their own. Generally speaking, at least 3 high-rank Void Overlords were needed to stall a dragon aspect. And this was under the situation where the dragon aspects did not cooperate with each other. Once all 5 dragon aspects were present, with the support of the planet's protective formation, the Burning Legion would be helpless. They could only be cannon fodder. Impossible. How could Maligos rush back in time? Elisa's shouted in shock. Among all the dragon aspects, Alexstrasza and Maligos had the worst mobility. It was not easy to create a portal that allowed them to pass through. Moreover, Thun would not let them go so easily. What exactly happened? You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.